Welcome to History Teller YT. Today we're embarking on an extraordinary journey back in time to explore one of the most fascinating civilizations the world has ever known, the Inca Empire and the legendary Machu Picchu. From the soaring peaks of the Andes to the incredible engineering marvels that still stand today, this is a story of human ingenuity, resilience, and mystery. In this history series, we'll uncover the rise of the Inca civilization, the intricate social and political systems they developed, and the extraordinary ways they adapted to the harsh mountain environment. We'll explore the breathtaking city of Machu Picchu, its architecture, agricultural innovations, and its spiritual significance to the Inca people. And finally, we'll delve into the dramatic clash between the Inca and the Spanish conquistadors that led to the fall of one of the most advanced civilizations in pre-Columbian America. By the end of this journey, you'll understand not only the facts and events, but the essence of a civilization that continues to captivate historians, travelers, and dreamers around the world. So, sit back, subscribe, and get ready to experience the rise, glory, and fall of the Inca Empire. Let's dive in. Long before the rise of the Inca Empire, the Andes Mountains were home to some of the oldest and most sophisticated civilizations in the Americas. These early cultures created the foundation that would one day allow the Inca to build the largest empire in pre-Columbian South America. The Andes were a difficult place to live. Towering mountains, thin air, freezing nights, and rugged valleys that seemed impossible to farm. Yet people here developed remarkable solutions that shaped their world and later influenced Inca society in powerful ways. One of the earliest cultures was the Norte Chico civilization, which existed over 4,000 years ago along the Peruvian coast. They built massive pyramids and developed complex urban centers long before many ancient civilizations across the world. These people did not use ceramics or write language, yet they organized large cities through trade, fishing, and agriculture. Their methods of social coordination later echoed through Inca administrative systems. Much farther south, the Chavan culture developed a religion that spread across the highlands. The Chavan were known for their impressive stone temples decorated with images of jaguars, snakes, and supernatural beings. Their religious networks likely helped unify distant Andean groups, creating early connections that eased the rise of later states. After the Chavan came other cultures, each adding something unique to future Andean civilization. The Moche civilization built advanced irrigation systems that turned desert land into fertile farmland. The Nazca created giant geoglyphs, massive images carved into the earth, while mastering textile art and pottery. In the highlands, the Wari Empire became one of the first true Andean superstates. They introduced road systems, storehouses, and administrative centers that strongly influenced later Inca strategies. These cultures did not disappear. Instead, the knowledge they created flowed forward through generations. By the time the ancestors of the Inca began gathering power in the Cusco Valley, the Andes already held thousands of years of innovation in farming, architecture, engineering, and religion. The rise of the Inca was not sudden. It was the result of deep roots nourished by every civilization that came before. According to Inca legend, their origins were not merely historical, but divine. The Inca believed that their ancestors emerged from sacred places connected to the gods, and these stories helped create unity, identity, and authority. The most famous origin myth tells of Manco Capac and Mama Aclo, the children of the sun god, Inti. The story says that these two figures rose from the waters of Lake Titicaca, carrying a golden staff. Inti instructed them to travel through the Andes until the staff sank easily into the ground. That place would become the heart of their future empire, Cusco. Another version, the Ayayachi or Paccaritambo myth, describes four brothers and four sisters emerging from a cave called Paccaritambo. These siblings were guided by divine power, but faced challenges among themselves. Some brothers grew jealous and violent. Others used cunning and strategy. In the end, only Manco Capac survived and became the founding leader of the Inca people. This story symbolized the struggle for unity among Andean clans and justified the Incas' claim to leadership. These myths were not just tales. They played a crucial political role. When the Inca began expanding their influence, they used these sacred stories to show that they had a special connection to the gods. Claiming descent from Inti allowed rulers, known as Sapa Incas, to portray themselves as chosen leaders who must guide the Andean world. This divine legitimacy helped them win loyalty from some groups and strike fear into others. Archaeological evidence suggests that small chiefdoms lived in the Cusco region long before the Inca became powerful. These groups built simple settlements, farmed the valley, and fought among themselves. The Incas started as just one of many local clans, not yet an empire, but their ability to unify families, build alliances, and strengthen social bonds gave them a unique advantage. By combining real historical growth with powerful myths, the Inca created a narrative of destiny, one that said their rule was not accidental but preordained by sacred forces. This idea would later help them build one of the largest empires on the continent, stretching over mountains, deserts, and forests. The early Inca, long before they became empire builders, lived in the Cusco Valley, a fertile basin surrounded by tall mountains. At first, Cusco was little more than a cluster of small villages belonging to different clans. These groups often engaged in conflicts over land, water, and resources. It was a challenging environment, but it also became the perfect place for a strong political center to emerge. Over time, the Inca family slowly gained influence through alliances, marriages, and strategic warfare. The earliest known leader, Manco Capac, is a mixture of myth and history, but what followed him was more grounded. Successive leaders such as Sinchi Roca, Loki Panki, and Meta Capac expanded their control over neighboring communities. Still, Cusco was not yet powerful. It was simply a growing chiefdom among many others. The Inca learned through constant conflict, building stronger warrior traditions and developing a sense of unity among their people. A turning point came under Inca Roca, who reorganized the royal lineage and introduced an education system for noble children. He ensured that future leaders would learn about governance, strategy, and religion from an early age. This educational tradition later became one of the strengths of the empire. Another influential ruler, Yawar Huacac, continued expanding territory but faced rebellions that weakened the Inca stability. His reign showed the fragile nature of early Cusco, revealing that without strong leadership, the region could collapse back into competing clans. The true foundation for the Inca Empire emerged under Viracocha Inca. He was one of the first rulers to establish more formal administrative structures and organize the Inca into a more cohesive regional power. However, during his reign, a powerful tribe called the Chanca attacked Cusco. Viracocha fled, believing Cusco would fall, but his son, Pachacuti, stayed behind, rallied the warriors, and defeated the Chanca in a legendary battle. This victory turned Pachacuti into a heroic figure and marked the beginning of the Inca transformation from a local kingdom into a rapidly expanding empire. Cusco, once a simple settlement, became the political and spiritual center of the Andes. Its streets, temples and administrative buildings began taking the shape of a planned city. The stage was now set for the Inca to rise beyond their valley and reshape the history of South America. Pachacuti, whose name means the world turned upside down, is widely considered the greatest ruler in Inca history because he transformed a vulnerable kingdom into a rising empire. Before his rise, the Inca were under threat from the powerful Chanca people, who had a reputation for fierce warfare and rapid expansion. When the Chanca attacked Cusco, most expected the Inca kingdom to collapse. Even Viracocha Inca, the reigning ruler, fled the capital. But Pachacuti, then a young prince, refused to run. Instead, he gathered the remaining warriors, inspired the citizens, and prepared to defend their homeland. The legends of this battle describe Pachacuti as a leader who fought so bravely that he inspired supernatural signs. Some stories claim that boulders on the battlefield came to life to fight for the Inca. While that part is myth, the historical result is clear. Pachacuti decisively defeated the Chanca and saved Cusco. This moment marked a dramatic shift, not only for the Inca, but for the entire Andean world. The victory gave Pachacuti enormous respect and authority, allowing him to challenge his father's rule. Eventually, the people recognized him as the true leader, and he became the next Sapa Inca. Once in power, Pachacuti did not simply rule. He rebuilt the entire kingdom from the ground up, realizing that the small Inca state needed more than military strength. He reorganized its political, religious, and social systems. He created new administrative divisions, restructured leadership ranks, and developed a system in which conquered regions were incorporated into the empire rather than destroyed. His strategies were not only effective but visionary, allowing the empire to expand far beyond Cusco. Pachacuti's rise illustrates how individual leadership can change the course of history. With determination, strategic thinking, and charisma, he transformed a fragile community into one of the most formidable empires in the Americas. Under Pachacuti's leadership, Cusco changed from a simple highland town into a majestic imperial capital. He redesigned the entire city according to a symbolic and political plan that reflected Inca power. One of his first major projects was the construction of the Great Temple Coricancha, which became the spiritual heart of the empire. Covered in sheets of gold and filled with sacred objects dedicated to the sun god Inti, Coricancha represented the divine authority of the Sapa Inca. The temple housed the mummies of past rulers, considered living beings in Inca culture, and served as a powerful reminder of the connection between the ruling family and the gods. Pachacuti also organized Cusco into two major halves, Hanan Cusco, Upper Cusco, and Huron Cusco, Lower Cusco. This division reflected social hierarchy, cosmic order, and administrative structure. Each half contained districts connected to different regions of the empire. Roads, plazas, and canals were carefully planned so that Cusco became not only a city, but a symbolic center of the universe. The main plaza, Jauca Ipida, became the stage for ceremonies, military parades, and royal events. During important festivals like Ini Raymi, thousands of people filled the plaza to celebrate the sun god, honor the ancestors, and watch the Sapa Inca perform sacred rituals. One of the most impressive architectural achievements during Pachacuti's reign was the creation of Sacsayhuaman, a massive fortress and ceremonial complex overlooking the city. Built with enormous stone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, Sacsayhuaman remains one of the greatest examples of Inca engineering. The stones fit together so precisely that even a blade cannot slip between them. This construction style helped the structure survive countless earthquakes that destroyed later colonial buildings. Beyond architecture, Pachacuti reorganized religion to unify the empire. He elevated Inti, the sun god, above other deities and established state-sponsored rituals. Priests, astronomers, and scholars recorded astronomical events, agricultural cycles, and ceremonial calendars. These religious policies helped legitimize the Incas' expansion, convincing conquered people that the Sapa Inca ruled with divine blessing. Through these transformations, Cusco became the political, spiritual, and cultural center of the empire, a city that symbolized Inca identity and power. Pachacuti's vision shaped the empire's future and left a legacy still visible in modern Peru. Military victories may have started the empire, but Pachacuti's administrative innovations made it strong and stable. Understanding that expansion alone would not secure long-term success, he created systems that ensured conquered territories remained loyal and productive. One of his most important achievements was the creation of the Tawantinsuyu structure, dividing the empire into 4 major regions: Chinchetu, Anisu, Kalasu, and Kanasuyu. Each region had its own governor, administrators, and responsibilities. Pachacuti introduced a policy known as Mitmac, which involved relocating groups of people throughout the empire. Some relocations rewarded loyal subjects by giving them better land, while others weakened rebellious groups by moving them away from their home territories. This strategy not only reduced resistance, but also spread Inca culture and strengthened unity across vast distances. At the same time, conquered leaders were required to send their children to Cusco to be educated in Inca customs. After their training, those children returned home as local rulers loyal to the Sapa Inca. Another administrative innovation was the creation of an extensive system of storehouses called kulkas. These buildings stored food, tools, clothing, and weapons for times of need. In an environment prone to droughts, earthquakes, and harsh winters, these storehouses protected the population and ensured that the empire could survive environmental challenges. This system also supported the Inca army, allowing soldiers to travel long distances without relying entirely on local supplies. The Inca did not have a written language, but they used a system of knotted cords called quipu to record data. Specialists known as Quipicamecs carefully tracked population numbers, resources, labor contributions, and taxes. Pachacuti strengthened this system so administrators could manage the empire efficiently. Every village, regardless of size, owed labor taxes known as MITA, which required citizens to work on state projects such as farming, construction, and road building. These innovations created a tightly organized empire capable of supporting rapid expansion. Without Pachacuti's administrative genius, the Inca Empire would never have reached the size and complexity for which it became famous. His reforms remained at the center of Inca governance long after his reign ended. After Pachacuti transformed the Inca from a small kingdom into a powerful empire, his son Tupac Yupanqui carried that momentum forward with incredible ambition. While Pachacuti built the foundations, Tupac Yupanqui expanded those foundations across mountains, valleys, deserts, and coastlines. He was not only a brilliant military leader, but also an explorer with curiosity that extended far beyond the boundaries of his empire. Under his rule, the Inca Empire grew to become the largest in South American history before the arrival of the Spanish. Tupac Yupanqui is often remembered as the emperor who pushed the empire into new regions that earlier Inca rulers had barely touched. He led massive armies across the northern highlands, capturing important territories in present-day Ecuador. The people there were powerful, organized, and skilled in warfare, making them one of the greatest challenges the Inca had ever faced. But Tupac Yupanqui used strategies that combined diplomacy and military force. He offered alliances to some groups while overwhelming others with carefully coordinated attacks. His campaigns in the north eventually brought the powerful kingdom of Quito under Inca control, though resistance continued for years. He also led campaigns toward the Amazon basin, a region the Inca often feared because of its dense forests, diseases, and unfamiliar terrain. Many stories describe Tupac Yupanqui's journey into the jungle as both dangerous and mysterious. While the Inca focused mostly on the Andes, his expeditions revealed that he was willing to push beyond the known world. Some legends even claim he traveled by raft to distant islands in the Pacific, discovering lands far beyond the mainland. Although historians debate this story, it reflects how deeply his people admired his adventurous spirit. Despite his military focus, Tupac Yupanqui was also an organizer. He understood that expanding an empire was not only about winning battles. It was about making sure new lands stayed loyal. Wherever he went, he ordered the construction of roads, bridges, garrisons, storehouses, and administrative centers. He introduced Inca officials, built temples dedicated to the sun god, and required local leaders to swear loyalty to Cusco. His policies ensured that the Inca Empire had stability, resources, and communication across thousands of miles of mountainous terrain. Tupac Yupanqui's reign marked the Inca Empire's boldest phase of expansion. His blend of bravery, intelligence, curiosity, and discipline made him one of the most respected leaders in Andean history. Although the Inca lacked wheels, iron tools, or horses, they built one of the most extraordinary transportation networks in the ancient world. Their road system, created largely during the reigns of Pachacuti and Tupac Yupanqui, allowed the empire to function with precision and unity. Covering more than 25,000 miles, these roads connected mountains, deserts, jungles, and coastlines. This system was the lifeline of the empire, supporting military movement, communication, agriculture, and trade. The most famous road, the Capac Nan, ran from north to south along the spine of the Andes. This highland road crossed glaciers, cliffs, rocky paths, and extreme altitudes. In some places, the road was carved directly into the side of mountains. In others, it stretched across flat highlands like a perfectly drawn line. Parallel to this route was the coastal road, which ran along the Pacific shoreline and connected fishing communities, farmlands, and administrative centers. Together, these routes formed the backbone of the empire. What made the Inca road system even more remarkable was not its length, but its engineering. The Inca built stone retaining walls to prevent landslides, staircases to climb steep slopes, drainage channels to avoid flooding, and rope bridges made of woven plant fibers. These bridges, some stretching hundreds of feet, were engineering masterpieces that connected valleys separated by deep gorges. Every year, villages worked together to rebuild the bridges, ensuring they never fell apart. This constant maintenance kept the transportation system active and reliable. Along the roads were hundreds of tambos, or rest stations. These buildings stored food, blankets, weapons, and supplies for travelers, especially soldiers and government messengers. Speaking of messengers, the Inca created an incredibly fast communication system using runners known as chasquis. These young men were trained to sprint across long distances, handing off messages at each tambo. Because of this relay system, information could travel hundreds of miles in just a few days, faster than many European kingdoms at the time. The road system played a major role in maintaining control over conquered regions. It allowed armies to move quickly to suppress rebellions, allowed officials to inspect territories, and ensured that goods, like coca leaves, salt, textiles, and food could move efficiently throughout the empire. Without these roads, the Inca Empire would never have been able to grow as large as it did. They turned the dangerous Andean landscape into an organized, interconnected world. As the Inca Empire expanded under the leadership of Pachacuti and Tupac Yupanqui, life for the people within the empire became more organized, structured, and interconnected. The Inca developed a social system that relied on cooperation, shared labor, and community responsibility. While the empire was ruled by powerful nobles and elite families in Cusco, it was the common people who formed the backbone of Inca society. The basic unit of social organization was the Ayllu, a community of families who lived and worked together. Each Ayllu had its own land, traditions, and responsibilities. Members of the Ayllu took care of one another, sharing food, tools, and labor. This system had existed long before the Inca, but the empire strengthened it and used it to organize the millions of people under its rule. Every individual belonged to an Ayllu, and through that membership, everyone had duties to fulfill. One of the most important duties was the mita, a labor tax that required each person to work for the state for part of the year. Unlike money taxes used in other empires, the Inca used labor as their main form of contribution. People worked on building roads, farming fields for the emperor, serving as soldiers, or participating in construction projects. In return, the government provided food from storehouses during times of scarcity and organized festivals that strengthened loyalty. Mita labor was essential. Without it, the massive infrastructure of the empire would have been impossible to maintain. Daily life in the empire was shaped by the environment. In the highlands, people farmed terrace fields carved into mountainsides, growing potatoes, quinoa, and maize. In warmer valleys, they planted fruits, chili peppers, and beans. Coastal communities fished in the Pacific Ocean, while Amazonian groups collected tropical crops and forest resources. Each region contributed what it produced best, creating a balanced system of exchange. Religion was deeply connected to daily life. Families worshipped local deities linked to mountains, rivers, and ancestors. At the same time, the state encouraged devotion to Inti, the sun god, creating unity across the empire. Festivals filled the calendar, including ceremonies for planting, harvesting, and honoring the dead. Music, dance, and colorful clothing played important roles in these celebrations, strengthening cultural identity. Though the empire was powerful, life for ordinary people remained simple. They lived in stone or adobe houses, cooked with clay pots, wore clothes made from llama wool, and passed down traditions through storytelling. Despite the empire's size, most people never traveled far from their homes. Yet they still felt connected to something greater, a vast empire that stretched across mountains and valleys, united by shared labor, shared religion, and shared leadership. When Huayna Capac took the throne, he inherited an empire already massive in size and rich in organization. His father, Tupac Yupanqui, had left him a well-structured and powerful state that stretched across thousands of kilometers. But Huayna Capac did not remain satisfied with simply ruling what he received. Instead, he pushed the boundaries even farther, expanding into northern Ecuador, strengthening internal systems, and attempting to bring the entire Andean world under unified control. Huayna Capac was known for his strict discipline and military intelligence. His rule marked a period of both glory and strain. Unlike previous emperors, who often focused on either expansion or internal administration, Huayna Capac had to manage both at once. The empire had grown so large that rebellions, cultural differences, and long-distance communication became increasingly challenging. He responded by increasing the presence of Inca officials in newly conquered regions and reinforcing the Mitmac system, sending loyal Inca families into rebellious territories to stabilize them. A major focus of his conquests was the Quito region, located in present-day Ecuador. The area was wealthy, strategically important, and densely populated. It resisted Inca rule intensely. Huayna Capac spent years campaigning in this region, gradually wearing down local resistance. His victory here gave him enormous pride, and he even built a second royal court in the region, treating it almost like his new capital. Some stories suggest that he preferred Quito's climate and political position over Cusco, which worried many nobles in the heartland. However, Huayna Capac's reign was not only about warfare. He oversaw construction projects, strengthened road networks, built new temples, and sent inspectors across the empire to improve local administration. He was also deeply involved in religious matters, often traveling to important shrines to perform rituals. People feared and respected him because he maintained a firm balance between authority and spiritual legitimacy. But the final years of his reign brought disaster. While in the north, Huayna Capac encountered a deadly epidemic, likely smallpox, introduced indirectly from European contact far away. The disease spread faster than news traveled, reaching the Andes before any Spaniard arrived. Huayna Capac, like millions of others, had no immunity and soon fell ill. His death created confusion because he had not clearly announced a successor. Worse still, one of his sons, Quayochi, died from the same disease around the same time. This uncertainty set the stage for one of the most destructive events in Inca history, a violent civil war between his two sons, Atahualpa and Huáscar. The empire he had strengthened for decades now faced internal collapse from a crisis nobody had expected. The Andes might look like a harsh place for farming, but the Inca turned the mountains into one of the most productive agricultural systems in the Americas. Feeding millions of people required creativity, teamwork, and massive engineering. The empire's survival depended entirely on its ability to grow, store, and distribute food, even across steep cliffs, icy altitudes, and dry valleys. What the Inca achieved in agriculture remains one of the greatest accomplishments in human history. The most iconic feature of Inca agriculture was terracing. To grow crops in the mountains, the Inca carved thousands of wide stone terraces into hillsides. These terraces reduced soil erosion, held water, created flat land, and made farming possible at high elevations. Some terraces stood so tall and wide that they looked like giant steps reaching into the sky. Each terrace had its own microclimate. Lower terraces grew warm weather crops like maize, while higher ones grew cold-resistant crops such as potatoes. Water management was equally advanced. The Inca built complex irrigation canals, stone aqueducts, and reservoirs that allowed them to guide water precisely where it was needed. Some canals stretched for miles, moving water across mountains and valleys. They even designed underground channels to reduce evaporation in dry regions. This system allowed the empire to farm in areas that would have been unproductive without engineering. The diversity of Inca crops was impressive. They domesticated over 70 types of crops, including potatoes, quinoa, maize, squash, chili peppers, peanuts, tomatoes, and coca leaves. They also cultivated unique Andean crops, such as osi, aluco, and maswa. This diversity protected them against crop failures. If one failed, others could still survive. Potatoes, in particular, were essential. The Inca developed a freeze-drying technique called chuno, which allowed potatoes to last for years. Chuno became a strategic food source stored in thousands of state warehouses. Speaking of storage, The Inca perfected the art of preserving and organizing food. They built huge networks of kulkas, cold storage storehouses placed in windy or high-altitude areas where food lasted longer. These warehouses held maize, quinoa, dried meat, dried fish, and chino. During times of drought, famine, or military campaigns, officials opened these storehouses to feed the population. This system was so efficient that many regions never faced starvation as long as the empire remained stable. Animal husbandry also played a big role. The Inca raised llamas and alpacas, which provided wool, meat, leather, and transportation. Llamas carried goods across long distances and were vital for the economy. Because the Inca lacked horses or large domesticated animals, llamas were the backbone of their transport system. Inca agriculture was not just about survival, it was about strategy. Their food system made the empire strong, allowed it to grow, and supported large armies that could travel across extraordinarily difficult terrain. Without this agricultural brilliance, the Inca Empire would never have reached its golden age. Religion was at the heart of Inca society, so deeply woven into daily life that politics, farming, warfare, and family traditions were all connected to spiritual beliefs. The Inca believed the world was alive with sacred power. Mountains, rivers, stones, and even certain animals were considered to have spirits. These spirits, called huacas, were worshipped throughout the empire. Every village had its own sacred places, and these local deities were respected even after the Inca expanded into new territories. The most important deity was Inti, the sun god. The Sapa Inca claimed to be his direct descendant, which gave him absolute authority. Worshipping Inti meant worshipping the emperor. The most powerful temple dedicated to Inti was Coricancha in Cusco, covered in gold that reflected sunlight so intensely that Spanish chroniclers later described it as blinding. Priests kept sacred mummies, ritual objects, and astronomical instruments inside the temple. Coricancha served as the center of a spiritual network that stretched across the Andes. But Inca religion was not limited to the sun. They worshipped Viracocha, the creator god, Mama Quilla, the moon goddess, Ilapa, the weather god, and countless regional spirits that protected specific landscapes. This flexible system allowed the empire to absorb local traditions instead of destroying them. When the Inca conquered a region, they often respected its deities but placed Inti above them, creating a hierarchy of spiritual power that mirrored the political system. Rituals played a huge role in maintaining unity and stability. One of the largest and most important ceremonies was Inti Raymi, the festival of the sun. Held during the winter solstice, it marked the new year and honored the sun god for bringing warmth and life to the Andes. Thousands of people gathered in Cusco to watch dances, drink chicha beer, listen to music, and witness the emperor perform sacred offerings. Animals were sacrificed, prayers were spoken, and the people celebrated for days. These ceremonies gave meaning to daily life and strengthened connections between communities. Religion also influenced agriculture. Priests carefully observed the stars, moon, and sun to create calendars that guided planting and harvesting. They believed that rituals could protect crops from hail, drought, or disease. Farmers often prayed before planting, offered coca leaves to the earth, and thanked Pachamama, Mother Earth, for providing food. Human sacrifice, though rare compared to other civilizations, existed in special ceremonies. The most solemn form was Capacocha, where young children, chosen for their purity, were sacrificed on mountain peaks. These sacrifices were performed only during major crises or after important events, such as the coronation of an emperor or a natural disaster. While difficult for modern people to understand, The Incas saw these rituals as sacred gifts that maintained cosmic balance. Inca religion helped create order in a vast and diverse empire. It bound people together, gave legitimacy to the rulers, inspired architecture and festivals, and shaped the worldview of millions. Spiritual belief was the engine that kept the empire united. To understand the soul of the Inca Empire, we must begin with the worldview that shaped every decision, every law, every building, and every act of daily life. The Inca civilization did not simply see the world as a physical space. To them, existence worked like a carefully balanced system of interconnected realms, spirits, ancestors, rules, and energies. These beliefs guided emperors and farmers alike, and without understanding them, it becomes impossible to understand why the Inca Empire functioned the way it did, or why it expanded so rapidly in such a short period of time. The Incas believed the universe was divided into three interconnected realms. The first was Hanan Pasha, the upper world of gods, celestial beings, the sun, the moon, the stars, and divine ancestors. This dimension represented purity, order, guidance, and cosmic authority. The second was Ke Pasha, the middle world, or the world of the living. Humans, animals, landscapes, and daily life existed here. This world was full of responsibilities: farming, family, governance, rituals, trade, and performance of duties. Finally, the third realm was Uku Pasha, the inner world or underworld, which was not a place of punishment like in some religions, but a realm of origins, secrets, fertility, and the spirits of the dead. It symbolized cycles, rebirth, and hidden power. These three worlds were not separate. They interacted constantly. The Incas believed harmony came when all realms stayed in balance. This idea was known as Aini, meaning sacred reciprocity. Aini shaped everything. You gave to the community, and the community supported you. You offered to the gods, and the gods protected you. You cared for the land, and the land fed you. Without Aini, nothing worked. With Aini, the entire empire, stretching mountains, deserts, valleys, rivers, and jungles, could function like a single living organism. This cosmic balance was physically represented in the Chicana, or Inca cross, a step symbol found in temples, textiles, carvings, and astronomical markers. The Chicana linked the three worlds with the center, representing the axis of the universe. Many historians believe ancient Inca cities were designed following the symbolic meaning of the Chicana, with temples and plazas placed in positions that reflected the order of the cosmos. Even more fascinating is how the Incas blended religion with astronomy. The sun, Inti, was not just a symbol of warmth and daylight. It was considered the divine father of the Inca people. The moon, Mama Quilla, represented the cycles of time, femininity, and protection. The stars and constellations guided farming cycles, seasons, ceremonies, and navigation. Instead of seeing constellations as groups of stars forming shapes, the Incas recognized dark constellations, patterns formed by the dark spaces of the Milky Way. These shapes, like the serpent, the fox, the toad, and the llama, were believed to be living beings, powerful spirit animals watching over the world. This worldview did more than inspire religion. It shaped architecture, city planning, irrigation, leadership, social structure, warfare, diplomacy, and even how the Incas viewed death. When we study their empire, what looks like engineering brilliance was often tied deeply to their spiritual understanding of the universe. And when we examine their downfall, we see that spiritual confusion and disruption played a role as well. Understanding the Inca cosmology is not just learning about their religion. It's learning how they thought, how they felt, how they interpreted events, and why they became one of the strongest civilizations in the ancient Americas. The Inca Empire was not a loose collection of tribes. It was a highly structured, disciplined, and orderly world where everyone had a defined place. At the top stood the Sapa Inca, the emperor considered the literal son of the sun. His authority was absolute. His decisions shaped the fate of millions. His word was law, and resisting him was not just rebellion. It was a violation of cosmic order. People believed that by obeying the Sapa Inca, they were obeying Inti himself. This belief is a major reason why the empire expanded so quickly and maintained stability across difficult geography. The Sapa Inca lived in splendid palaces made of perfectly cut stone, decorated with gold plates, silver ornaments, and fine woven textiles. His clothing featured bright colors and rare feathers, and he wore a unique royal fringe across his forehead, marking him as the highest spiritual and political figure of the empire. When he traveled, thousands followed him: guards, nobles, priests, engineers, administrators, musicians, and servants. Roads were cleared, bridges prepared, food stored, and towns readied for his arrival. However, the Sapa Inca did not rule alone. Beneath him was a complex hierarchy known as the nobility, divided into two major classes: the royal blood nobles and the appointed nobles. The royal nobles came directly from the emperor's family line, the Panicas. These were not just families, but powerful clans with political influence, wealth, and control over territory. The appointed nobles were skilled generals, priests, administrators, and advisors who earned their positions through loyalty and ability. Below the nobles were the Caracas, or local chiefs. These leaders governed communities across the vast empire. Even when the Incas conquered new regions, they often allowed the local Caracas to remain in power, so long as they pledged loyalty, paid tribute, and followed imperial laws. This policy reduced rebellion and created stability. Most people in the empire belonged to the Ayllu, the traditional Andean community unit. An Ayllu was like a large extended family that shared land, labor, responsibility, and heritage. Every person, from farmers to craftsmen, belonged to an Ayllu. Members worked the land together, built structures together, and helped each other through sickness, crop failure, or personal hardship. Through this communal system, the empire ensured that nobody went entirely without support. Taxes were not paid with coins. There was no money in the empire, but through labor. This tax, called the MITA, required citizens to work for the government a certain number of days each year. In return, the state provided protection, food storage, public works, infrastructure, and security. Social mobility was limited but possible. A brilliant soldier could become a general. A loyal administrator could rise to a noble role. Exceptional craftsmen could be relocated to royal workshops. However, most people remained in their birth Aylus, following the same farming cycles their ancestors had followed for generations. The Inca justice system maintained order through strict laws. Theft, rebellion, and adultery were considered serious offenses and often punished harshly. But the Incas also emphasized prevention. Communities were responsible for advising and guiding their members. A person who made a mistake was often corrected by the collective before the state stepped in. This layered hierarchy allowed the Inca Empire to function smoothly across thousands of kilometers. But the same structure that kept the empire stable also made it fragile. If something disrupted the top of the hierarchy, like the death of the Sapa Inca without a clear successor, the entire system could collapse rapidly. While emperors, generals, and engineers shaped history, the heart of the Inca Empire was the regular people. The farmers, herders, potters, builders, weavers, and traders who kept the empire alive day after day. Understanding their daily life allows us to see what the empire truly looked like from the ground. And surprisingly, the lives of ordinary Inca citizens were stable, organized, and centered on family, community, and the land. Most people lived in stone or adobe houses grouped into small villages within Nalu. A typical home had a single room with a thatched roof and a simple interior. There were no chairs or tables. People sat on woven mats. They stored food in clay jars, kept llamas or guinea pigs for meat, and collected water from nearby streams. Kitchens were built outdoors, where families used small stone stoves to cook with wood or dried animal dung. The Incas did not separate work into weekdays and weekends. Instead, their lives followed the rhythm of nature. The agricultural year guided everything. When rains came, seeds were planted. When the dry season arrived, terraces were repaired, canals cleaned, and harvest stored. The empire depended on crops like potatoes, maize, quinoa, beans, peanuts, peppers, and hundreds of tuber varieties unique to the Andes. Farmers used wooden plow tools called taclas, and entire alas worked side by side on collective farmlands. Food was preserved using natural methods. The Incas mastered freeze-drying by placing potatoes at high altitudes, where cold nights and warm days removed moisture. This created chuno, a light, long-lasting food that could be stored for years. This was essential for preventing famine in bad seasons. Clothing reflected climate and craftsmanship. Most garments were made from alpaca or llama wool, woven into colorful patterns. Women wore long dresses called anaku, while men wore tunics known as anku. Skilled weavers created textiles so fine they were considered more valuable than gold. These textiles were offered as gifts to nobles, soldiers, or the gods themselves. Children learned responsibilities early. Boys helped herd animals, gather firewood, or work in fields, while girls learned weaving, cooking, and caring for younger siblings. Education was practical and cultural, with emphasis on respect, work, and ani, the sacred balance of giving and receiving. Music and festivals played an important social role. Instruments like pan flutes, drums, rattles, and conch trumpets accompanied dances and community celebrations. Ceremonies honored the sun, the moon, the mountains, the ancestors, and the changing seasons. These festivals strengthened unity and reminded people of their connection to the cosmos. In daily life, the Incas embraced simplicity, discipline, and cooperation. They valued harmony over individual ambition, duty over personal gain, and collective strength over independence. This worldview enabled millions of people to live productively across some of the most difficult terrain on Earth. Yet beneath the smooth functioning of society, dangers quietly gathered. The empire's dependence on cooperation meant that any internal division could shatter harmony. And with the arrival of the Spanish less than a century after the empire reached its peak, the balance that had sustained the Incas for generations would soon be tested like never before. To truly grasp the scale of the Inca Empire, you must imagine something extraordinary. A civilization without the wheel, without horses, without metal vehicles, without mass transportation. Yet it managed to build one of the most advanced and extensive road networks in human history. This road system was not a simple path from one village to another. It was the nervous system of the empire, carefully designed to connect mountains, deserts, valleys, jungles, coastlines, and high plateaus. More than 25,000 miles of roads stretched across an area larger than the Roman Empire, tying together millions of people under a single centralized authority. The most impressive part is not just the length, but where the roads were built. The Andes Mountains are among the most dangerous terrains in the world, full of steep cliffs, towering peaks, deep canyons, and unstable slopes. The Incas carved staircases into solid rock, built terraces into mountainsides, and created paths that allowed safe travel across landscapes most people would consider impossible to cross. In some areas, they built suspension bridges made from braided grass ropes, stretching across deep ravines with astonishing engineering skill. These bridges were replaced every year in community ceremonies, showing how deeply engineering and tradition were connected. One of the most famous routes in this network was the Kapaknan, or Royal Road. It stretched north to south for thousands of miles, linking major cities such as Cusco, Quito, and Huánuco Pampa. Along this road, the Incas constructed tampas, or way stations, every 10 to 15 miles. These stations provided travelers with food, shelter, storage, and supplies. They also acted as checkpoints for officials, soldiers, and royal couriers, ensuring the empire remained orderly and connected. But why did the Incas invest so much effort into building such an extensive road network? The answer lies in administration, control, and communication. A vast empire cannot survive without the ability to move troops quickly, deliver resources where they are needed, and maintain unity between distant regions. Roads allowed the Sapa Incas' authority to reach the furthest borders of the empire. They made it possible to transport crops, tools, and luxury goods across different environmental zones. They enabled armies to travel with remarkable speed, which helped the Incas conquer territories and suppress rebellions far more efficiently than other pre-Columbian civilizations. Yet even beyond practical use, the roads symbolized power. They represented the empire's mastery over nature and its ability to bring order to chaos. They were a physical reminder that the Inca state was everywhere, on the mountains, through the valleys, across deserts, and along rivers. Wherever the roads went, the reach of the Sapa Inca followed. As we continue to explore the empire's communication and transportation systems, it becomes clear that these roads were not just pathways for walking. They were pathways for culture, economy, military strength, religion, and authority. They created the backbone of an empire that thrived where most societies would have been crushed by the unforgiving landscape. Within the Inca road system operated one of the fastest communication networks of the ancient world, the Chasquis. These were highly trained runners stationed in relay teams across the empire. They lived in small huts along the main roads and were responsible for carrying messages, orders, news, and even delicate goods from one end of the empire to the other. Without the Chasquis, the Inca administration would have struggled to maintain control over such a massive territory. With them, messages could travel hundreds of miles in just a few days. Each Chasca was selected for endurance, speed, discipline, and memory. Many trained from childhood, running across high-altitude trails, often at elevations where the air was so thin that ordinary people struggled to breathe. The Incas understood their environment deeply, and the Chasquis were living proof of how well humans could adapt to extreme landscapes. A Chasca would run a short distance before passing the message to the next runner, ensuring that communication never slowed. This system functioned like a human-powered telegram network, but it wasn't only written messages they carried. The Incas did not have a writing system in the traditional sense. Instead, Chasquis carried quipus, bundles of knotted strings that recorded numerical data, records, and coded information. Trained specialists known as Quipikamaics could read these knots, interpreting census counts, tax records, harvest quantities, or military information. When a quipu arrived, local administrators knew exactly what instructions or data were being communicated. Chasquis also delivered small goods like herbs, medicines, rare foods, ceremonial items, and even fresh fish from the coast to the emperor in the mountains. This meant that even though Cusco was located far from the sea, the Sapa Inca could enjoy coastal delicacies within a matter of days. The combination of road networks and relay runners created an internal communication system that many empires, with far more advanced transportation technologies, never achieved. The effectiveness of the Chasca system also allowed the Inca military to respond rapidly to threats. If a rebellion started in a distant region, a message could reach Cusco quickly. The emperor could immediately dispatch troops, ensuring problems never grew large enough to destabilize the empire. This speed was one of the reasons the Inca Empire expanded so rapidly and maintained order for so long. Sadly, the importance of the Chasquis also made them key targets during the Spanish invasion. Once the network collapsed due to disease, war, and the destruction of infrastructure, the empire's ability to communicate fell apart. But before that tragic decline, the Chasquis were one of the most remarkable features of Andean civilization, a living, running symbol of unity, discipline, and resilience under the Inca state. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Inca Empire is how it managed to sustain millions of people without using coins, marketplaces, or currency systems found in other civilizations. Instead of money, the Incas built an economy based entirely on labor, resources, and organization. At the center of this economic system was the MITA, a labor tax requiring citizens to work for the state for a set number of days each year. This labor supported public works such as road building, farming of state lands, mining, military service, and construction of temples and cities. In exchange for labor, the Inca government provided the goods and services needed for stability: food reserves, protection, disaster relief, and infrastructure. The Incas believed deeply in the concept of reciprocity. The state gave, and the people gave back. This balance made the empire strong and prevented famine even during difficult seasons. To maintain this system, the Incas built enormous storage complexes known as calcas, located in strategic locations across the empire. These calcas store dried foods like maize, potatoes, chino, quinoa, beans, and salted meats. They also held tools, weapons, ceremonial objects, and clothing. Some storage sites were so well designed that they kept food fresh for years due to natural ventilation, cool temperatures, and dry conditions. This organization allowed the empire to handle droughts, crop failures, and natural disasters more effectively than many modern states. Agricultural surplus fed soldiers on campaign, supported workers on government projects, and sustained communities during difficult times. Because the empire controlled everything, from farmland distribution to storage to redistribution, social inequality remained surprisingly low for such a large civilization. Most people had what they needed, even if they did not have luxury. Trade did exist, but it was controlled by the state. Some regions exchanged specialized goods, such as jungle fruits, coastal fish, mountain metals, and desert salt. Llamas served as pack animals, carrying goods across the empire. Artisans and craft specialists produced fine textiles, pottery, jewelry, and ritual objects. But private trade for personal enrichment was minimal. The system focused on collective welfare and state control. This highly organized economy allowed the Incas to build monumental structures like Machu Picchu, Sacsayhuaman, and Ollantaytambo, not through forced slavery, but through the coordinated labor of communities fulfilling their tax obligations. While demanding, the system ensured unity and productivity, making the Inca economy one of the most efficient in ancient history. However, the strength of the system was also its vulnerability. Because everything depended on centralized control, the moment leadership became unstable, the entire structure could collapse. And when the Spanish arrived, bringing disease, chaos, and civil war, the the economic system that supported millions of people began to crumble. The Inca Empire did not rise through peaceful diplomacy alone. While they preferred to integrate new regions through negotiation and alliances, warfare played an essential role in building Tawantinsuyo, the land of the four quarters. The military force of the Incas was one of the most organized, disciplined, and fast-moving armies in the ancient Americas. Their success came not simply from the number of soldiers they could field, but from their superb logistical planning, the roads they built, the communication network they maintained, and the deeply ingrained discipline in their society. Unlike many empires, the Incas did not maintain a full-time, standing army during peaceful times. Instead, every able-bodied man was trained and expected to fight when called upon. Because of the MITA system, the labor tax, the government could call up huge numbers of men from different alias at a moment's notice. When needed, hundreds of thousands of troops could assemble in surprisingly short time due to the efficient road system and the Chaska messengers. Weapons were crafted with the materials available. Although the Incas lacked iron and steel, they made effective arms. Slings that could launch stones with deadly speed, wooden clubs, bronze-tipped spears, obsidian blades, bolas for trapping enemies, and large shields made from wood or leather. Elite units often carried more specialized gear, and some troops were armored with padded cotton armor or protection made from thick animal hides. Even without the advanced metallurgy found in other continents, the Incas produced weapons that were more than effective in the rugged terrains they dominated. Military training emphasized endurance, speed, and group coordination rather than individual heroism. Soldiers marched across steep mountains, through harsh deserts, and into thick jungle environments. Their ability to adapt to varied terrains made them far more flexible than many of their enemies. The Incas also constructed massive military storehouses along roads, filled with preserved food, weapons, clothing, blankets, and other supplies. This meant the army could sustain long campaigns without needing local resources, reducing the chance of starvation or supply failure. Before launching attacks, the Incas often attempted diplomacy. They offered newly encountered groups a chance to join the empire peacefully. If accepted, these regions received access to Inca infrastructure, protection, roads, and food reserves. But if they refused, warfare became inevitable. Once conflict began, the Inca army moved swiftly, overwhelming most opponents with sheer numbers and superior organization. Victories were not just military events, they were political strategies. After conquering a region, the Incas often relocated a portion of the population, mixing them with communities from other parts of the empire. These groups were known as Mitmacuna or resettled peoples. This policy reduced rebellion, spread Inca culture, and ensured that conquered territories remained loyal. The military was not only a tool of war, but a mechanism for cultural unity. Soldiers returning home carried new ideas, customs, stories, and experiences for faraway territories. Through military expansion, the empire spread its language, Quechua, and its administrative system. Roads, bridges, terraces, temples, and administrative centers followed wherever the army went. By the height of its power, the Inca military machine was unstoppable within the Andes, an empire-building force driven by discipline, order, and a shared belief in divine authority. Yet this same structure, so efficient in expansion, would later face unimaginable challenges once a threat unlike anything they had ever seen arrived from across the ocean. While the Inca army was powerful, the empire's rapid growth cannot be explained by military strength alone. In fact, the Incas preferred diplomacy over bloodshed. Their approach to conquest was far more complex than simply defeating enemies. They employed a sophisticated combination of negotiation, psychological influence, administrative strategies, and cultural integration. When the Incas approached a new territory, they sent envoys carrying gifts, fine textiles, food, coca leaves, and symbolic objects representing Inca authority. These envoys offered the local leaders a choice: join the empire willingly or face military consequences. They explained the benefits of surrender: access to the empire's advanced agricultural terraces, security against rival tribes, stable food reserves, improved irrigation, and protection from natural disasters through the Inca storehouse system. Most communities understood that resisting was risky. Many chose cooperation, especially groups suffering from drought, food shortages, or internal conflict. Becoming part of the Inca Empire brought stability and access to a powerful support network. Once a region agreed to join, the Incas allowed the local Caracas chiefs to remain in power but under supervision. The Incas introduced their laws, required tribute, and taught administrative practices to ensure smooth governance. One of the most effective tools of integration was religion. The Incas did not force conquered peoples to abandon their traditional gods. Instead, they honored them but positioned the Inca deities, especially Inti, the sun god, as superior. In many places, the Incas built temples to Inti near local sacred sites, symbolically merging spiritual traditions. Priests and administrators were trained to blend Inca rituals with local beliefs, creating a unified religious landscape across the empire. Another strategy was the use of royal marriages. The emperor or noble families often married daughters of important leaders from newly incorporated regions. These alliances built trust, strengthened cooperation, and created family bonds that tied distant communities to the Inca ruling class. However, the most transforming strategy was the Mitmac system, where entire populations were relocated to new territories. This policy had multiple objectives: weaken rebellious groups, spread loyalty to the empire, and connect distant regions through cultural blending. When skilled workers, stonemasons, weavers, engineers were resettled, they brought their expertise to new locations, contributing to the rapid development of high-quality infrastructure across the empire. The Incas also used symbols of prestige to integrate new regions. Rulers were invited to Cusco, the imperial capital, where they witnessed the grandeur of the court, the temples, the gold decorations, the rituals, and the engineering marvels. Experiencing the splendor of the Inca state often convinced leaders that joining such a powerful civilization was wiser than resisting it. Despite these measures, some groups remained fiercely independent, particularly in the jungle and desert regions. These areas required military intervention, and even then, full control was sometimes difficult. Yet overall, the combination of diplomacy, cultural blending, and administrative intelligence allowed the Incas to expand at an astonishing speed for nearly a century. This system of integration created unity, but it also exposed the empire's vulnerability. Once the central leadership was disrupted, the delicate balance between diplomacy and control began to weaken. The empire's strength depended heavily on the Sapa Inca's ability to maintain harmony, and when a crisis emerged, everything would change. Among all Inca rulers, none shaped the empire as profoundly as Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui, the ninth Sapa Inca. His reign marked the true beginning of the Inca Empire. Before Pachacuti, the Incas were a regional Andean kingdom centered around Cusco. But under his leadership, the state transformed into a powerful imperial force with expansive ambitions. Pachacuti's rise to power began during a time of crisis. A rival group, known as the Chancas, launched a fierce attack on Cusco. The reigning Sapa Inca, Viracocha, fled the city in panic, leaving the people defenseless. Pachacuti, then a young prince, refused to abandon his home. He rallied warriors, organized defenses, and led a brilliant counterattack that drove the Incas away. This victory changed everything. He became a hero, a symbol of strength, and the rightful ruler in the eyes of the people. Once he assumed the throne, Pachacuti undertook sweeping reforms. He reorganized the government, established strong administrative divisions, and created the four suyus, quarters that made up Tontinsiu. Each suyu had its own governor, road system, and resources, all reporting back to Cusco. This administrative innovation became the backbone of the empire. But Pachacuti's achievements did not stop with politics. He was a visionary architect and urban planner. Under his direction, Cusco was rebuilt into a masterpiece of engineering and symbolism. Temples, plazas, palaces, and canals were constructed with precision-cut stones that fit so perfectly they needed no mortar. The most important structure, the Coricancha, became the spiritual center of the empire. Its walls were covered in gold sheets that reflected the sunlight, symbolizing the sacred power of Inti. Pachacuti also expanded the empire dramatically. He conquered the regions surrounding the central Andes, integrating them through military power and diplomacy. Under his leadership, the Incas built massive terraces, irrigation canals, storehouses, and fortresses to support growing populations. His administrative policies ensured conquered territories became part of a unified state rather than rebellious provinces. Perhaps his most mysterious and enduring legacy is Machu Picchu. Many historians believe Pachacuti commissioned the construction of this sacred royal estate high in the mountains. Machu Picchu may have served as a spiritual retreat, astronomical observatory, and royal residence, a place where Pachacuti could connect with the cosmos away from the political center of Cusco. By the end of his reign, the Inca state had transformed from a small kingdom into a vast empire stretching from modern-day Ecuador to Chile. His reforms and expansions laid the foundation for future rulers like Topa Inca Yupanqui, who continued extending the empire's reach. Pachacuti's legacy was monumental, but it also set high expectations for future rulers. The empire became more complex, more demanding, and more reliant on central authority. When leadership faltered generations later, the entire structure would face the greatest crisis in its history. Sometimes people act like they don't care, but deep down, they're hiding a storm of thoughts they don't know how to express. This happens way more than you think, especially with someone who has built emotional walls. They may seem calm, quiet, or even uninterested, but inside, they're replaying conversations, overthinking how they appeared, and wondering if others truly understand them. The truth is, some people learned early in life that showing emotion gets them hurt, so they become experts at looking fine even when they're breaking inside. You might have met someone who gives short replies, avoids deep talks, or jokes around to hide real feelings. But behind all that, there's a mind that cares too much, not too little. People don't hide emotions because they're cold. They hide them because caring loudly once made them feel unsafe. Yet what's interesting is that the more someone suppresses their emotions, the stronger those emotions become. They don't disappear. They stack up like pages in a book that never gets opened. Over time, even small situations can feel overwhelming because everything is already full inside. That's why many quiet or emotionless people suddenly break down over something minor. It's not that moment they're reacting to, but the hundreds before it. You may see someone cry after a single small argument, but what you're actually seeing is years of unspoken thoughts finally escaping. This doesn't mean they're weak. It means they've been strong for so long that their mind finally opened a release valve. And here's the most surprising part. People who hide their feelings are often the ones who feel the deepest, love the hardest, and care the most. They just don't know how to trust the world with their heart anymore. If you've ever cared for someone like this, you'll know how difficult it can be to understand them. They rarely say what hurts them. They often keep their distance when all they want is closeness. They may push you away because they fear losing you. It's a confusing mix of wanting connection but fearing it at the same time. The moment you show consistency, real, steady, patient consistency, those walls start to crack in the most beautiful way. They begin to talk more. They begin to smile more. They begin to trust again. And if someone like this chooses to open up to you, even a little, understand that it's not something small. It's one of the biggest gifts they can give. There's a strange but powerful truth about human behavior. People often distance themselves from the very thing they want the most. You might wonder why someone who clearly likes you suddenly pulls away, becomes quiet, or acts differently. It's not always because their feelings changed. Sometimes it's because their feelings became too strong. When emotions grow faster than someone expects, fear kicks in. Fear of rejection. Fear of disappointment. Fear of not being enough. Fear of losing something before it even starts. So instead of moving closer, they step back, not to escape you, but to protect themselves. Think about those moments when someone starts texting slower, responding shorter, or acting less excited. Most people assume they lost interest, but often it's the complete opposite. Their mind starts questioning everything. What if I care more than they do? What if I'm annoying? What if they don't feel the same? What if I ruin everything by showing too much? People who care deeply often carry an internal war between what they feel and what they fear. Every message they send is overthought. Every silence from you feels louder than it should. Every compliment makes them happy, but every pause makes them anxious. This emotional imbalance pushes them into a self-protective mode, even when they don't want to be in it. That's why some people act hot and cold. One day they're close, comfortable, funny, expressive. The next day they seem distant. It's not because they're playing games. It's because their heart moved faster than their courage. They want connection, but they're terrified of being hurt. They want to open up, but they don't trust their emotions to stay safe. So they slow things down to breathe, analyze, and regain control. And ironically, this makes the other person confused when the truth is so much more tender. They're scared of losing something that hasn't even fully begun. If you've ever been this person, you know how exhausting it feels. You want to show affection, but worry you'll seem too invested. You want to express your feelings, but fear the reaction. You want closeness, but have memories of being pushed away. You want to stay, but you're scared of staying alone. This emotional contradiction creates a cycle where the mind tries to protect the heart by building distance, even though the heart never wanted distance at all. When someone likes you deeply, one of the most unexpected signs is how nervous they become around you. They overthink their words, worry about how they look, and fear doing something embarrassing. This nervous energy comes from wanting to be seen in the best way, even when they don't admit it. Their hands might shake slightly, their voice might sound different, or they might laugh too much. These small signals reveal big emotion, feelings that are louder than words. People often assume confidence means interest, but many times the real interest hides behind awkwardness and hesitation. This nervousness doesn't come from weakness. It comes from emotional investment. When someone doesn't care, they speak freely and act naturally. But when they do care, their brain goes into overdrive. Every second they spend with you becomes a moment they don't want to mess up. They plan what to say before speaking and then replay it afterward to see if they sounded okay. They notice small details about you, your smile, your tone, the way you react, and store these details in their mind like precious notes. They remember things you forgot you even said. They care in silence. What makes this even more interesting is the way nervous people show affection indirectly. They may avoid eye contact, not because they're ignoring you, but because looking at you makes their heart beat too fast. They may talk less, not because they don't like you, but because they don't want to say something wrong. They may act serious, not because they're cold, but because they're holding their emotions tightly inside. Their calmness isn't real calmness. It's emotional overload disguised as control. But here's the beautiful part. Once they feel safe with you, all that nervousness turns into warmth. The awkwardness slowly fades. Their words become clearer. Their smile becomes more natural. They start joking more, sharing more, and opening up in ways they never do with others. This slow transformation is one of the purest forms of connection. Watching someone go from anxious around you to comfortable with you. Some people don't realize how much they impact someone else's life simply by being present. You might not say much, you might not show too many emotions, but your energy alone can change someone's entire day. Humans are incredibly sensitive to emotional signals, even the ones that aren't spoken out loud. A single smile, a small act of kindness, or even just listening without judgment can leave a deep mark on someone's heart. You never know who looks forward to your messages, who replays your voice in their head, or who feels comforted just by knowing you exist in their world. People often underestimate the quiet ways they matter to others. What's even more interesting is that the people who think they matter the least usually matter the most. These are the ones who feel invisible, unsure, or unappreciated, yet they carry a light in them that others feel naturally drawn to. Their presence feels safe. Their words feel warm. Their honesty feels refreshing. They don't realize that while they're doubting themselves, someone else is out there wishing they could be closer to them. Someone is secretly grateful for their kindness, inspired by their strength, or comforted by their simplicity. The world rarely tells people how important they are, especially the ones who deserve to hear it the most. The truth is, everyone carries invisible battles. Some people are fighting anxiety, heartbreak, loneliness, or memories that still hurt. When you show someone genuine care, even in the smallest way, you give them something priceless. Hope. Hope that people can be kind. Hope that connection still matters. Hope that they are not moving through life unnoticed. That's why your words and actions hold more power than you think. Even if you feel like your presence doesn't make a difference, trust this. Someone out there breathes easier because you exist. Another thing people forget is that caring for someone doesn't always mean big gestures. Sometimes it means checking in. Sometimes it means remembering the little details. Sometimes it means giving them space when they need it, but staying close enough so they know they're not alone. Emotional presence leaves a stronger mark than physical presence. And the people who understand this are the ones who unknowingly become the strongest emotional anchors in someone else's life. If you've ever felt small, unseen, or unimportant, remind yourself that impact isn't measured by attention. It's measured by connection. And the right people, those who value your heart, feel your presence even in your silence, and miss you even in your quietest moments. One of the strangest patterns in human relationships is how people test each other without even realizing they're doing it. When someone cares deeply, they often start paying attention to how the other person reacts to small things. The delay in replies, the tone of a message, the change in behavior, or even the absence of certain routines. These micro tests aren't meant to manipulate. They're rooted in fear. Fear of being the only one who cares. Fear of being replaced. Fear of giving too much to someone who gives too little in return. These tests are subtle, emotional checks to see whether you value them as much as they value you. You might notice someone suddenly becoming quieter to see if you ask what's wrong, or They might stop messaging first to see if you miss them. They might act a little distant to see if you move closer or walk away. They might share something personal, waiting to see if you treat it carefully. These aren't games. They're vulnerability hidden inside actions. They want reassurance, but they're afraid to ask for it directly. So they observe. They watch your patterns. They notice the changes. And they silently measure whether you still feel the same. This kind of testing often happens with people who have been hurt before. Past betrayals leave emotional scars that whisper, "Don't trust too fast. Don't give your whole heart. Don't assume they care." So instead of expressing their needs, they try to feel out the situation. It's less risky. It gives them time to understand the emotional temperature, and it protects them from disappointment. They don't want to look desperate or too emotional, so they mask their need for affirmation with little behaviors that reflect their insecurities. But here's the deeper truth. People test you when they want you to stay. If they didn't care, they wouldn't bother noticing your effort, your consistency, or your reactions. They would keep their distance and walk away easily. Testing is a sign of emotional investment. They want to know where they stand in your life. They want stability, safety, and assurance. They want to feel chosen, not just tolerated. The challenge is that many people misunderstand these tests. Instead of offering reassurance, they pull away too, thinking the other person lost interest. This creates emotional distance and confusion. The connection becomes shaky because both people are waiting for the other to take the first step. The only way through this is communication. Clear, honest, steady communication. When someone is unsure, be consistent. When someone is afraid, be patient. When someone is testing you silently, show them through your actions that they don't need to test you at all. There's something incredibly powerful about being understood without needing to explain yourself. When someone truly gets you, your silence, your moods, your tone, your habits, it creates a connection that feels almost impossible to replace. Most people listen to respond, not to understand. But the rare ones who listen with their heart instead of their ego, those are the people who can calm storms you don't even talk about. They sense your discomfort before you say anything. Notice your sadness behind a smile and celebrate your small joys like they're their own. With them, you don't need perfect words. Your presence is enough. What makes this kind of connection so rare is how deeply it requires someone to observe you. Not in a controlling way, but in a caring way. They pay attention to your patterns. They notice when you're quieter than usual. They sense when something is bothering you, even when you insist you're fine. They know when you need space and when silence means please stay close. They understand the little signals others overlook, not because they're overthinking, but because they genuinely care. This emotional sensitivity isn't something you can fake. It's a natural response to someone you value deeply. Being understood like this makes you feel safe. You stop doubting yourself. You stop hiding your emotions. You stop pretending everything is okay when it isn't. You start opening up in ways you never did before. Not because someone forced you to, but because they created a space where your heart feels protected. That's something not many people can offer. And if you find someone like this, they deserve honesty, appreciation, and effort. They are giving you something priceless, emotional clarity. But there's a twist. People who understand others deeply often struggle to find someone who understands them. They're the quiet healers, the listeners, the ones who give comfort but rarely receive it. They carry emotional weight for others, yet keep their own pain quietly tucked away. They're strong, but they get lonely. They're insightful, but they feel unseen. They're caring, but they're tired. When they finally find someone who sees them the same way they see others, their whole world shifts. They become softer, happier, more expressive. They finally feel like they're home in someone's presence. This type of connection doesn't come often. It requires patience, emotional intelligence, and genuine care. But when it happens, it feels like two minds finally speaking the same language without needing words. It's rare, powerful, and unforgettable. Human emotions are unpredictable, yet they follow patterns that are surprisingly universal. One of the most fascinating patterns is how people slowly reveal their real selves in stages, almost like peeling the layers of an onion. At first, people show you their public self, the version of them that is polite, controlled, and socially acceptable. This is the version they feel safest showing because it carries the least risk. But as trust builds, their deeper layers begin to surface. They start sharing opinions honestly instead of sugarcoating them. Their humor becomes more natural. Their fears become more visible. They begin talking about things they normally hide. This shift doesn't happen suddenly. It happens through repeated moments of emotional safety. Those who understand this pattern recognize that the first version of someone is rarely the true version. People open up emotionally only when they sense you won't misuse their vulnerability. They watch how you react to their confessions, how you respond when they express fear, how you handle disagreements, and whether you make them feel small or respected. Every reaction you give becomes a signal. Is it safe to reveal more? That's why trust builds slowly. Trust isn't created by grand gestures. It's created by consistency. The more predictable and reliable your emotional responses, the safer they feel expressing their authentic self. Another interesting part of this emotional process is how people often hide the parts of themselves they assume others won't accept. They hide their insecurities, their doubts, their painful memories, their guilty thoughts. But when someone listens without judgment, those hidden parts finally come up. And that is when real bonding begins. Not when everything is perfect, but when honesty replaces performance. True connection happens when two people are brave enough to show the unedited versions of themselves. It's a level of emotional intimacy that cannot be faked. But there's a challenge. Once someone opens up, they become emotionally attached. Vulnerability creates connection, and connection creates attachment. This is why people fear opening up to the wrong person. It's not the sharing that hurts. It's the risk of being dismissed, ignored, or betrayed afterward. Emotional betrayal hits harder than physical pain because it destroys the foundation of trust. So when someone trusts you with their real thoughts, understand what it means. They're offering you the most fragile part of themselves. And how you handle that determines whether the bond strengthens or breaks. This is why emotional safety is one of the rarest gifts. Most people don't find it easily, but when they do, it changes how they experience relationships forever. One of the most overlooked truths about human connection is that people communicate in ways beyond words. Silence, for example, speaks volumes. The tone of a message, the speed of a reply, the way someone looks at you, the energy they bring into the room. All of these reveal what they feel, even when they don't say it out loud. Someone who cares will show it in subtle, consistent ways. They'll remember what you said weeks ago. They'll ask if you ate. They'll notice the change in your mood, even when you think you're hiding it. They'll adjust their tone to match your emotional needs. This quiet form of communication is far more truthful than spoken promises. On the other hand, people who don't care also reveal it through distance, forgetfulness, lack of effort, or emotional inconsistency. They won't remember small details. They won't check in. Their replies will feel hollow, forced, or delayed. They won't notice your sadness unless you spell it out. Humans are excellent at sensing emotional disinterest, even if they don't want to admit it. Your intuition picks up signals your mind tries to ignore. That's why conversations with certain people feel warm and easy, while with others, they feel heavy or draining. Another important part of unspoken communication is emotional alignment. This happens when two people naturally understand each other's rhythms. When one person slows down, the other adapts. When one is excited, the other matches that energy. When one is hurting, the other becomes gentle without needing an explanation. Emotional alignment doesn't come from force, it comes from resonance. Two people either sync or they don't. And when they do, the connection feels effortless, almost like breathing. This kind of connection is rare because it requires emotional intelligence, something many people lack. Emotional intelligence means noticing without being told. It means caring without being asked. It means reflecting rather than reacting. It means seeing beyond the surface. People with emotional intelligence make communication smoother, deeper, and safer. They make mistakes, but they repair them. They express their feelings clearly. They don't punish others with silence. They don't manipulate with guilt. They don't treat emotions like weaknesses. What's fascinating is that once someone experiences this level of emotional connection, it becomes impossible to settle for anything less. They realize that real communication isn't loud. It's gentle. It's consistent. It's felt more in the heart than heard in the ears. And once you've felt it, you'll know exactly when it's missing. People often misunderstand the difference between attention and attachment. Attention is short-term. Anyone can give it. Anyone can fake it. It can come today and disappear tomorrow. But attachment is different. It grows quietly, slowly, and deeply. It forms when someone becomes emotionally significant in your life, when their presence brings comfort, when their absence feels strange, when their messages matter more than others, when their voice calms you and their silence worries you. Attachment is not about wanting someone. It's about needing their emotional closeness in ways you cannot easily replace. The psychology behind attachment is rooted in consistency and emotional reliability. The more someone shows up for you, emotionally, mentally, even digitally, the more your brain begins to associate them with safety. This is why losing someone you're attached to feels like physical withdrawal. It's not desperation. It's the brain adjusting to the loss of emotional stability. People don't realize how deep these bonds go until they're broken or threatened. That's why emotional consistency is the strongest form of love or care. It builds trust, safety, and comfort, all without dramatic expressions. However, attachment becomes dangerous when it forms with someone who is emotionally unstable or inconsistent. When the person you care for switches between warm and cold, attentive and distant, kind and indifferent, your nervous system becomes confused. You won't know what to expect, and this uncertainty creates anxiety. The brain begins to crave the moments of warmth, even if they come rarely. This is why inconsistent people can create the most intense emotional attachments. They trap you in a cycle of hope and disappointment, closeness and distance. But healthy attachment feels different. It feels calm, not chaotic. Safe, not stressful. Present, not unpredictable. The right person will not make you question your worth. They won't disappear without reason. They won't make you feel like you're begging for their time. Instead, they'll offer consistent emotional presence. They'll make you feel valued without you having to earn it. They'll communicate honestly instead of playing mind games. This is the kind of attachment that helps you grow, not break you down. Humans are wired for connection, but not all connections are equal. Some drain your energy. Some confuse your heart. But the rare ones, the ones with genuine emotional alignment, steady communication, and deep understanding, these are the bonds that transform your life. They don't just give you comfort. They change how you view yourself, others, and love itself. People often underestimate the subtle ways emotions influence every decision they make. especially when it comes to relationships and trust. We like to believe that logic dominates our choices, but in reality, emotional patterns guide most human behavior. Even when someone seems calm, rational, and collected, their feelings are quietly dictating their attention, reactions, and priorities. Take, for example, someone who consistently checks on you, even when it's inconvenient. It may appear trivial, but the underlying message is clear. They value your emotional well-being. They care enough to interrupt their own routine, sacrifice time, or extend themselves in ways that may not even be noticed. This level of investment, although subtle, creates bonds stronger than any spoken promise because actions reveal intentions far more reliably than words. Interestingly, human brains are wired to notice patterns and consistency. When someone behaves reliably, our minds interpret that as a signal of safety, trustworthiness, and care. Over time, these signals reinforce attachment. This is why small, consistent gestures, like remembering a detail from a casual conversation, asking about a stressful day, or showing up when it matters, carry more weight than grand, one-off displays of affection. Relationships thrive on reliability, not showmanship. Conversely, inconsistency breeds insecurity. Even small lapses, delayed responses, absent empathy, miscommitments accumulate over time, quietly eroding trust. Most people fail to realize that emotional security is fragile, and a single pattern of carelessness repeated subtly can undo months or years of positive connection. Emotional investment is both powerful and delicate. Understanding this is key to maintaining meaningful bonds. Furthermore, emotional investment isn't limited to romantic or familial connections. Close friendships, professional mentorships, and community bonds are all influenced by these unseen patterns. Someone who consistently supports another, listens without judgment, and demonstrates empathy creates a psychological space where vulnerability can flourish. This, in turn, promotes mutual respect, loyalty, and deeper understanding. On the other hand, neglecting the small details, missing calls, failing to follow through, ignoring emotional cues, signals detachment, even if one believes they are maintaining connection. In essence, relationships are measured less by occasional grand gestures and more by consistent, thoughtful behaviors that quietly affirm significance. Emotional intelligence, the ability to notice, respond, and adapt to these patterns, is what transforms ordinary interactions into profound human connections. Without it, even well-meaning individuals can unknowingly erode bonds. The fascinating paradox is that people who struggle to express their emotions often exhibit the deepest care. They may hesitate to verbalize affection, overthink responses, or act reserved, but their subtle attentiveness speaks volumes. A quiet text to check in, remembering a minor preference, or taking care of a task for someone else without acknowledgement. These are indicators of profound emotional engagement. Recognizing and valuing these actions, rather than focusing solely on overt expressions, is essential to understanding the true nature of care. Emotional attention is often hidden, indirect, and nuanced, yet it forms the foundation of trust, attachment, and genuine intimacy. One of the most intriguing aspects of human connection is how silence functions as communication. People often mistake silence for disinterest or rejection, yet silence can convey deep emotional meaning. The absence of words doesn't necessarily indicate absence of feeling. In fact, silence can reflect thoughtfulness, respect, emotional processing, or restraint. Someone who pauses before responding, chooses not to interrupt, or allows quiet moments to exist is often demonstrating awareness of emotional weight. These silences, when understood in context, reveal a person's internal state more accurately than hastily spoken reassurances or impulsive reactions. Silence also plays a role in testing boundaries. People unconsciously use pauses to gauge attention, investment, and patience. For example, if a person shares a vulnerability and receives a measured, thoughtful response rather than immediate, performative comfort, they feel heard more authentically. Conversely, immediate, exaggerated reactions can sometimes undermine emotional resonance because they feel rehearsed or insincere. This is why listening actively, attentively, and without the urge to fill every pause is one of the most powerful acts of care. It validates the speaker's experience and allows emotional space for processing. Silence, therefore, is not emptiness, but an active component of meaningful interaction. Another layer of silence lies in emotional regulation. People who manage their responses carefully often appear distant or reserved. This is a protective mechanism. They feel deeply, but must regulate the intensity of their emotions to prevent overwhelming themselves or others. For instance, someone who truly cares may avoid sending multiple messages in rapid succession, not because they are disinterested, but because they fear their urgency could pressure or overwhelm the other person. These self-regulating behaviors, though subtle, are conscious acts of empathy. They require the individual to monitor their internal state continuously and adapt their behavior to maintain relational equilibrium. Emotional intelligence in this context is not about visible heroics. It is about nuanced management of internal and external emotional flows. Understanding the meaning behind silence also prevents misinterpretation. Many conflicts arise because one person misreads the other's quietness as rejection, indifference, or hostility. Yet, often, it is an indicator of care, attentiveness, or internal processing. Recognizing this distinction transforms interpersonal dynamics. It encourages patience, reflective listening, and conscious observation of patterns rather than impulsive judgments. Silence becomes a medium of communication rather than a void, a demonstration of respect and thoughtfulness rather than absence. Mastering the interpretation of such subtle cues is essential for anyone seeking deep, lasting human connection, as it bridges the gap between intention and perception. Attachment is one of the most powerful and complex forces in human relationships. It is both a source of comfort and a potential origin of vulnerability. People naturally seek emotional anchors, individuals who provide consistent reassurance, presence, and reliability. The neurological basis of attachment explains why losing such an anchor can produce intense psychological distress. The brain associates attachment figures with safety, stability, and emotional regulation. When this connection is disrupted, it triggers stress responses similar to physical pain. This explains why emotional separation, even in otherwise functional relationships, can feel unbearable. The impact is universal across cultures, genders, and ages, demonstrating the evolutionary importance of social bonds. Healthy attachment is characterized by mutual responsiveness. Both parties recognize and respect each other's emotional needs. Boundaries are understood, and communication is frequent, honest, and constructive. This balance prevents overdependency while maintaining closeness. Conversely, unhealthy attachment arises when one party becomes inconsistent, manipulative, or dismissive. Such dynamics create a cycle of craving and withdrawal, reinforcing anxiety and insecurity. The emotional roller coaster reinforces attachment due to intermittent reinforcement, a psychological mechanism where unpredictability amplifies emotional investment. Individuals often misinterpret this intensity for love, when in fact, it is a product of inconsistent emotional availability. Moreover, attachment is deeply intertwined with trust. Without trust, emotional closeness cannot survive. Even minor breaches, broken promises, dismissive comments, or lack of acknowledgement accumulate over time, corroding the foundation of the relationship. Yet consistent, empathetic, and thoughtful actions can rebuild attachment even after setbacks. Recovery requires patience, transparency, and predictable care. This is why emotional maturity is crucial in maintaining long-term connections. Emotional maturity entails recognizing the fragility of trust, understanding the weight of attachment, and responding intentionally rather than impulsively. It involves listening deeply, reflecting before reacting, and validating feelings without judgment. Finally, attachment creates a framework for emotional growth. When individuals experience secure attachment, they develop confidence, resilience, and the ability to form future bonds. Conversely, unstable or unsafe attachment can result in emotional guardedness, difficulty trusting, and challenges forming meaningful connections later in life. Recognizing the patterns of attachment, both one's own and those of others, is essential for fostering relationships that are supportive, enduring, and transformative. In essence, attachment is not just an emotional reaction. It is the scaffolding of human connection, shaping how people love, trust, and engage with the world around them. Trust is one of the most fragile yet essential elements in any relationship, whether personal, professional, or social. Building trust requires consistency, transparency, and reliability over time. It is not something that can be manufactured quickly. It develops slowly as patterns of behavior reinforce the sense of safety. People who betray trust often underestimate the cumulative effect of their actions. A single lapse in honesty or reliability can begin a chain reaction that erodes years of emotional security. Conversely, consistent demonstrations of care, follow through, and empathy gradually solidify trust, creating a psychological environment where vulnerability feels safe. Humans are hardwired to seek trustworthy individuals because security in relationships is essential for emotional regulation and overall well-being. Another dimension of trust is the implicit understanding that emotional signals will be received accurately. When someone shares a personal fear, a painful memory, or a deep desire, trust ensures that the listener interprets the message as intended. Misunderstandings, however, can create cracks in trust even when intentions are pure. That is why communication is so vital. Listening actively, reflecting accurately, and responding thoughtfully reinforces the perception of reliability. Trust is as much about understanding and empathy as it is about honesty. A person can tell the truth yet still erode trust if they fail to perceive or validate the emotional weight behind the words. An interesting psychological phenomenon occurs when trust is combined with attachment. The brain forms strong neural patterns that link emotional well-being to the presence of the trusted individual. This attachment-trust connection explains why people often experience heightened anxiety when separated from those they trust. The brain literally interprets absence as a threat to emotional safety. Conversely, being in proximity to a trusted figure creates calm, reduces cortisol levels, and produces feelings of comfort and security. This neurological response highlights why trust is not abstract. It has real, measurable effects on mental and physical states. It reinforces why maintaining trust is more than a moral or ethical responsibility. It is a biological and psychological necessity for sustaining healthy human connections. Trust also requires patience, especially when rebuilding after mistakes. Forgiveness, transparency, and corrective action are necessary to restore reliability. People who consistently reflect on their behaviors, communicate openly, and align their actions with their words gradually regain the confidence of those they may have hurt. Trust, therefore, is dynamic, requiring ongoing attention and conscious maintenance. It is not a static quality. It must be nurtured continuously. Understanding this principle is crucial for forming durable, resilient relationships capable of weathering conflicts, misunderstandings, and life's inevitable uncertainties. Empathy is the cornerstone of meaningful human interaction. It is more than merely feeling sympathy for someone else. It is the ability to truly understand another person's experience, perspective, and emotional state. Empathy involves active engagement, thoughtful observation, and the conscious effort to see the world through someone else's eyes. When exercised consistently, it transforms relationships. People who feel understood are more likely to be open, cooperative, and emotionally available. Empathy reduces conflict because it allows individuals to anticipate reactions, acknowledge emotional needs, and respond in ways that validate feelings rather than escalate tension. It is a skill, a mindset, and an emotional strategy all at once. A particularly profound aspect of empathy is its role in conflict resolution. Disagreements are inevitable in any long-term relationship, but empathic responses determine whether conflicts become destructive or constructive. Understanding the underlying emotional drivers behind another person's behavior, fear, frustration, insecurity, or hope, enables more precise and compassionate communication. Instead of reacting impulsively, empathy encourages measured, thoughtful responses. The ability to pause, consider the other's perspective, and address the root causes of emotional distress is what differentiates transient disputes from lasting resentment. Over time, empathy fosters trust, resilience, and relational depth, creating a foundation that withstands repeated challenges. Empathy also requires self-awareness. One cannot fully understand another without recognizing one's own biases, emotional triggers, and limitations. Emotional projection, assuming another feels as you do, can distort perception. Therefore, genuine empathy demands reflection, noticing your own feelings, separating them from the other's experience, and approaching interactions with humility and curiosity. This self-regulated emotional awareness allows for accurate interpretation of social cues, subtle gestures, and unspoken concerns. Furthermore, empathy is contagious. People who practice it influence others to do the same. Teams, families, and communities thrive when empathy becomes embedded in behavior because it encourages cooperation, reduces misunderstandings, and promotes collective well-being. Finally, empathy strengthens attachment and trust. People naturally gravitate toward those who understand them without judgment. Emotional resonance, the feeling that someone genuinely perceives and validates your experience, enhances relational bonds. When empathy is consistently expressed through attentive listening, patient responses, and thoughtful action, it signals care and reliability. Conversely, the absence of empathy, disinterest, dismissiveness, or impatience creates emotional distance, eroding trust and attachment over time. Understanding, practicing, and valuing empathy is therefore essential for developing deep, enduring, and meaningful human connections across all areas of life. Emotional resilience is another critical component of healthy relationships. Humans are inherently vulnerable to emotional upheaval. Loss, disappointment, rejection, and uncertainty are universal experiences. Emotional resilience does not eliminate these challenges. Rather, it equips individuals to navigate them without being overwhelmed. People with high emotional resilience maintain stability in the face of stress, regulate their emotional responses, and sustain relational commitments even during turbulent periods. This skill is closely linked to self-awareness, self-regulation, and social intelligence. Those who cultivate resilience are able to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively, fostering a sense of safety and reliability that benefits themselves and those around them. A key factor in resilience is the capacity to process emotions constructively. Suppression, denial, or avoidance can create temporary relief, but ultimately increases stress and vulnerability. Resilient individuals acknowledge feelings honestly, explore underlying causes, and take intentional steps to address or manage emotional challenges. This approach not only strengthens their own emotional well-being, but also models adaptive strategies for those in their social sphere. People around resilient individuals benefit because they experience stability, empathy, and constructive problem solving in response to crises rather than panic or volatility. In this way, emotional resilience propagates through social networks, reinforcing relational strength and trust. Resilience also depends on perspective, viewing challenges as opportunities for growth, interpreting setbacks as temporary rather than permanent, and maintaining a long-term vision for relationships enables individuals to withstand short-term turbulence. For example, a disagreement between partners or friends may trigger intense feelings of frustration or hurt. A resilient approach does not dismiss these emotions, but instead channels them into productive dialogue, mutual understanding, and problem solving. Resilience transforms conflict into learning, adversity into bonding, and uncertainty into opportunities for reinforcing emotional reliability. Moreover, resilience interacts synergistically with attachment, empathy, and trust. People are naturally drawn to those who remain steadfast and emotionally regulated because such individuals provide psychological safety and stability. They anchor relationships, allowing emotional vulnerability without fear of chaos or rejection. Ultimately, emotional resilience is a dynamic process requiring continuous effort. It is not innate or fixed. It is cultivated through self-reflection, mindful response to stress, and deliberate development of coping strategies. Resilient individuals sustain connection, model healthy emotional behavior, and create environments in which trust, attachment, and empathy can flourish. In any long-term relationship, romantic, familial, or platonic, resilience serves as the backbone of enduring intimacy, stability, and mutual growth, ensuring that bonds remain strong despite the inevitable uncertainties of life. Human relationships often thrive or collapse based on the subtle dynamics of emotional reciprocity. This refers to the unspoken balance of giving and receiving care, attention, and understanding. When two people engage in a relationship, whether romantic, platonic, or professional, their interactions create a pattern of exchange that either builds or erodes connection. Emotional reciprocity is rarely conscious. It is a complex interplay of gestures, tone, timing, and responsiveness. A single gesture of genuine care, a text to check in, remembering a meaningful detail, or offering support in a small but significant way, signals to the other person that their presence matters. Over time, these consistent, subtle actions create a foundation of trust, reliability, and emotional security that defines the strength of the relationship. Conversely, a lack of reciprocity generates imbalance, often leading to stress, frustration, or emotional withdrawal. If one party consistently invests while the other fails to notice or respond appropriately, the relationship becomes unsustainable. The emotional cost of imbalance accumulates silently. Feelings of underappreciation, neglect, or insignificance slowly erode connection. This dynamic can occur even in relationships with a long history of closeness, because human beings naturally require reinforcement to maintain trust and attachment. Emotional reciprocity acts as both a lubricant and a structural support. It smooths interactions, making collaboration and intimacy easier, and reinforces the underlying framework of connection that allows relationships to endure conflict, stress, or change. Another critical aspect of emotional reciprocity is its timing and subtlety. Oversaturated care, expressed in an overwhelming or performative way, can feel manipulative or burdensome, whereas small, consistent signals of attention and support are far more effective. The human brain is highly sensitive to patterns. It notices predictability, consistency, and attentiveness more than grand gestures. This is why the seemingly minor actions, asking how someone's day went, remembering a detail from weeks ago, or offering quiet support during a difficult moment, often carry greater weight than major declarations of affection. These microactions demonstrate awareness, empathy, and commitment. They are the invisible threads that weave trust and attachment together over time, and their absence is often the quiet precursor to relational decay. The interplay of emotional reciprocity, trust, and attachment illustrates why relationships require continuous attention and mindfulness. It's not enough to rely solely on past history, shared experiences, or verbal assurances. Connection thrives on active, observable patterns of mutual care. Individuals who recognize and respond to these patterns are able to cultivate relationships that are resilient, supportive, and emotionally fulfilling. Conversely, those who ignore subtle cues, fail to respond consistently, or take the other person's presence for granted risk eroding attachment and trust, often without even realizing the magnitude of the damage. In essence, emotional reciprocity is both the glue and the heartbeat of enduring human connection. Conflict is inevitable in any meaningful human relationship. Yet, the way individuals handle conflict determines whether a relationship grows stronger or deteriorates. Emotional intelligence, active listening, and empathy are crucial components of effective conflict resolution. Many conflicts escalate because one or both parties fail to perceive the underlying emotional context, responding instead to surface-level triggers. For example, a heated argument over a trivial matter may actually be rooted in unspoken fear, past hurt, or insecurity. Recognizing these deeper dynamics allows individuals to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively, transforming potential discord into opportunities for mutual understanding and growth. Effective conflict resolution begins with self-regulation. Emotional regulation allows an individual to process initial reactions, manage impulses, and respond constructively rather than destructively. People who act impulsively often exacerbate problems, escalating tension and creating cycles of resentment. Conversely, those who pause, reflect, and consider the emotional state of both parties can navigate disagreements with minimal harm to the relationship. This does not mean suppressing emotions. It means expressing them deliberately and strategically in ways that communicate feelings without triggering defensiveness or retaliation. Self-regulation is, therefore, a critical skill for maintaining long-term relational stability and emotional safety. Empathy also plays a central role in resolving conflicts effectively. Understanding the other person's perspective, acknowledging their emotions, and validating their experience, without necessarily agreeing, creates a sense of recognition and emotional safety. People who feel heard and understood are more likely to reciprocate openness, reducing tension and fostering constructive dialogue. Beyond verbal communication, empathy is expressed through nonverbal cues such as body language, tone of voice, and timing of responses. Even silence, when used thoughtfully, can signal attentiveness, reflection, and respect for the other's perspective. Conflict resolution is not simply about finding compromise. It is about preserving trust, attachment, and emotional alignment, ensuring that disagreements strengthen rather than weaken relational bonds. Finally, consistent patterns of constructive conflict resolution reinforce attachment and trust over time. Individuals who repeatedly demonstrate patience, understanding, and effective communication during disagreements build a reputation as reliable, emotionally intelligent partners. This, in turn, encourages deeper vulnerability, openness, and interdependence. Relationships become resilient because emotional safety is maintained even under stress. Conversely, repeated patterns of miscommunication, defensiveness, or dismissiveness during conflict erode trust, heighten insecurity, and weaken emotional bonds. Understanding conflict as an opportunity for growth, rather than merely a challenge or obstacle, is essential for cultivating enduring relationships characterized by trust, empathy, and deep emotional connection. Vulnerability is one of the most transformative yet challenging aspects of human relationships. True vulnerability involves exposing aspects of oneself that are usually guarded. Fears, insecurities, past experiences, and deeply held desires. While vulnerability carries inherent risks, it is also the mechanism by which trust, attachment, and intimacy are created. People who practice vulnerability intentionally foster environments where reciprocity, empathy, and understanding flourish. Conversely, relationships devoid of vulnerability tend to remain superficial, transactional, or emotionally distant. The paradox of vulnerability is that by risking emotional exposure, individuals create the conditions for greater security, trust, and connection over time. One key aspect of vulnerability is timing. Sharing sensitive information too early or too indiscriminately can overwhelm the other person or create imbalance in the relational dynamic. Conversely, withholding vulnerability indefinitely prevents the development of authentic connection. Emotional intelligence guides individuals in discerning when, how, and to whom vulnerability should be expressed. This involves assessing trustworthiness, observing behavioral patterns, and recognizing signals of receptivity. Vulnerability, when expressed strategically and authentically, signals courage, self-awareness, and investment in the relationship. It also invites reciprocity. When one person shares deeply, it encourages the other to do the same, creating a mutually reinforcing cycle of openness and emotional depth. The effects of vulnerability extend beyond the individual. When a person allows themselves to be seen fully, it transforms the relational space. Emotional walls come down, empathy increases, and mutual understanding deepens. Vulnerable moments create opportunities for teaching, healing, and reinforcing attachment. People become more resilient together because they have experienced acknowledgement and acceptance of their authentic selves. Conversely, when vulnerability is met with dismissal, judgment, or neglect, it can cause profound emotional harm, eroding trust and creating lasting reluctance to engage deeply in future relationships. In essence, vulnerability is both a bridge and a test. It connects individuals profoundly, but only when met with care, attentiveness, and consistency. Ultimately, vulnerability, emotional reciprocity, conflict resolution, empathy, and trust are interconnected components of human relational architecture. They operate together to create meaningful bonds that endure over time. Relationships that cultivate these qualities develop resilience, intimacy, and depth, allowing individuals to navigate challenges, adapt to change, and experience profound connection. Conversely, neglecting these elements through inconsistency, dismissiveness, or emotional unavailability erodes attachment, undermines trust, and stunts relational growth. Mastery of these principles is essential not only for sustaining long-term connections, but for achieving a fulfilling and emotionally rich human life. Perception plays a powerful role in how humans navigate relationships. It is often said that perception is reality, and in interpersonal dynamics, this is almost literally true. How someone interprets your words, actions, or even silence can define the trajectory of your connection with them. Humans naturally filter interactions through the lens of their past experiences, insecurities, and biases. Someone who has been hurt in the past may perceive caution as indifference, restraint as rejection, or even consistent kindness as an attempt at manipulation. Understanding that perception is subjective and not always aligned with intent is vital for navigating complex social and emotional relationships. Misalignment between perception and intent often generates misunderstandings that accumulate quietly until they explode into conflicts that feel disproportionate to the immediate situation. This is why clarity in communication is essential. People often assume that others know what they feel, think, or expect, but assumptions are frequently inaccurate. Expressing intentions, desires, and boundaries explicitly helps prevent misinterpretation and fosters emotional security. When paired with empathy and active listening, clear communication strengthens trust and attachment. For instance, if someone is reserved or quiet, directly asking about their comfort, needs, or perspective can prevent the projection of assumptions that might otherwise damage the relationship. Emotional intelligence allows individuals to navigate the subtleties of perception and response, ensuring that both parties feel seen, understood, and validated, rather than misjudged or misunderstood. Another critical factor is the timing and consistency of communication. Human brains are sensitive to patterns, and repeated inconsistencies can create anxiety, even if each instance is minor. A delayed response, a shift in tone, or a perceived lack of attentiveness can accumulate over time, subtly eroding attachment and trust. Conversely, consistent alignment between words, actions, and emotional presence builds confidence and relational security. Patterns matter more than isolated incidents. Consistency communicates reliability at a subconscious level, reassuring individuals that the relationship is stable and that emotional vulnerability will not be met with unpredictability or harm. Understanding this pattern-oriented nature of perception allows individuals to proactively nurture connections, reducing misunderstandings and reinforcing relational stability. Finally, perception is a two-way street. While one must be aware of how others perceive them, it is equally important to critically examine one's own filters. Recognizing the influence of past experiences, cognitive biases, and emotional states on interpretation prevents misjudgment and reactive behavior. By combining self-awareness, active observation, and intentional communication, individuals can create relational environments where perception aligns closely with reality. This alignment reduces conflict, strengthens attachment, and deepens intimacy. Understanding the interplay of perception and intent is therefore a cornerstone of emotional intelligence and relational mastery. essential for sustaining healthy, meaningful connections over time. Vulnerability is a cornerstone of profound human connection, yet is often the most difficult aspect to navigate. People fear exposing their weaknesses because vulnerability involves a risk of judgment, rejection, or emotional pain. Despite these risks, vulnerability is the mechanism through which deep intimacy and trust are formed. When someone shares an authentic thought, fear, or emotional experience, they create an opportunity for mutual understanding and reciprocal disclosure. The courage to be seen without masks signals investment in the relationship and invites the other party to respond in kind. This mutual exchange forms the foundation for relationships that are not only enduring but emotionally rich, as individuals are able to experience each other authentically. Timing, context, and trustworthiness are critical when it comes to expressing vulnerability. Revealing a deeply personal thought too early or to someone unprepared to receive it can lead to disappointment or a breach of emotional safety. Conversely, withholding vulnerability indefinitely prevents the development of genuine intimacy, leaving relationships superficial. Emotional intelligence guides individuals in discerning the appropriate moments to share, evaluating both the environment and the responsiveness of the other party. A strategic approach to vulnerability involves balancing openness with discretion, ensuring that disclosures are met with attentiveness and care rather than indifference or dismissal. This intentional practice fosters relational resilience and emotional alignment. The effects of vulnerability extend beyond the individual to influence the relational dynamic itself. Vulnerable moments encourage empathy, patience, and trust building. When one person demonstrates authenticity, it creates a ripple effect. The other individual is more likely to mirror this openness, engage with heightened awareness, and respond with thoughtful care. Over time, these cycles of vulnerability and empathy strengthen attachment, solidify trust, and cultivate relational safety. Conversely, when vulnerability is met with criticism, neglect, or judgment, it damages trust, discourages openness, and creates emotional withdrawal. Understanding the mechanics of vulnerability and intentionally fostering an environment where it is safe to express transforms human relationships, providing the emotional scaffolding for intimacy, cooperation, and deep relational fulfillment. Ultimately, vulnerability, when paired with empathy and consistent emotional presence, allows relationships to transcend superficial interaction. It transforms ordinary exchanges into deeply meaningful experiences. People who navigate vulnerability effectively do not simply communicate feelings. They create psychological space where emotional growth, resilience, and profound attachment can occur. In this way, vulnerability is not merely a risk. It is the conduit through which humans develop the capacity to love, trust, and form enduring connections that shape the trajectory of their lives. Attachment and trust are deeply intertwined, forming the emotional scaffolding upon which all lasting relationships are built. Attachment arises from repeated experiences of reliability, responsiveness, and emotional attunement, creating an implicit expectation that the other person will continue to provide psychological safety. This expectation is reinforced neurologically. The human brain associates attachment figures with comfort, stability, and regulation of stress responses. Loss or perceived unreliability in attachment triggers heightened anxiety, uncertainty, and even physiological stress reactions. Conversely, the presence of a consistent, responsive attachment figure generates calm, lowers cortisol, and supports psychological and emotional resilience. Understanding attachment as both emotional and biological underscores the profound significance of trust, consistency, and care in human relationships. Healthy attachment is characterized by mutual reinforcement. Both parties invest in maintaining stability, respond to emotional needs, and honor boundaries. Predictability in behavior and emotional response strengthens attachment because it signals safety. Insecure attachment, by contrast, emerges when patterns of care are inconsistent, unpredictable, or neglectful. Such instability produces cycles of craving and withdrawal, amplifying anxiety and undermining relational trust. Intermittent reinforcement, when attention or care is unpredictable, can create intense emotional dependency, often mistaken for deep love. The emotional turbulence of insecure attachment illustrates the importance of reliability and transparency in establishing a secure, enduring relational bond. Attachment also facilitates emotional growth and resilience. Secure attachment provides a safe base from which individuals can explore vulnerability, engage in conflict constructively, and develop self-regulation. Within this supportive framework, people are more willing to take emotional risks, share authentic thoughts, and express feelings openly. Conversely, inconsistent or unsafe attachment inhibits relational development, fosters emotional guardedness, and limits the capacity for intimacy. Securely attached relationships cultivate trust, empathy, and emotional intelligence, creating an environment where connection deepens naturally over time. They provide both stability and challenge. Stability in the form of predictable care and emotional safety, and challenge in the form of opportunities for mutual growth, negotiation, and understanding. In essence, attachment and trust are not merely components of relationships. They're the foundation upon which the architecture of meaningful, lasting human connection is constructed. Human connection is often guided by subtle emotional cues that go unnoticed, yet profoundly impact relationships. One of the most powerful of these cues is emotional consistency, the alignment between what a person says, does, and feels. When actions reflect words and intentions, the brain perceives stability and safety, fostering trust and attachment. Conversely, inconsistency between verbal expressions and actions triggers internal alarms, even if the mismatch is minor or unintended. For example, someone who expresses care verbally but fails to follow through with small, concrete gestures creates cognitive dissonance in the mind of the recipient. Over time, repeated inconsistencies, such as forgetting small commitments, sending mixed signals, or reacting unpredictably, accumulates silently, eroding trust and weakening attachment. Emotional consistency is thus a cornerstone of reliable human relationships, providing a foundation upon which vulnerability, empathy, and mutual understanding can flourish. The subtlety of emotional consistency is that it is often unconscious. People may act inconsistently due to stress, distraction, or internal conflict, yet the relational impact is real and measurable. Emotional patterns are interpreted intuitively. Humans are wired to detect alignment and misalignment between expressed and observed behavior. Consequently, the perception of reliability or lack thereof emerges more from patterns than from isolated events. The brain prioritizes repeated cues over single gestures, forming long-term judgments about trustworthiness and emotional safety. This is why small, daily behaviors often matter far more than grand, infrequent declarations. Checking in consistently, following through on promises, and matching tone to content are micro-actions that reinforce trust and demonstrate care. Over time, these repeated, subtle gestures accumulate to build a relational scaffolding that supports deeper connection and attachment. Additionally, emotional consistency is intimately linked with emotional intelligence. Those who can regulate their own emotions recognize the impact of their behavior and adjust responses consciously tend to maintain alignment between words and actions. They understand that each interaction sends signals that shape attachment, trust, and intimacy. This awareness allows for proactive repair when inconsistencies occur. Acknowledging a lapse, providing clarity, and realigning behavior demonstrates accountability, which not only restores trust, but often strengthens relational bonds. In this sense, consistency is not merely about repetition. It is about mindfulness, attentiveness, and the conscious cultivation of relational stability. It transforms relationships from precarious to secure, providing the emotional infrastructure necessary for vulnerability, empathy, and deep connection. Emotional attunement is another essential component of enduring human relationships. Attunement refers to the ability to perceive, interpret, and respond appropriately to the emotional states of others. It goes beyond empathy by involving active alignment with another person's feelings, moods, and energy. Humans are deeply social beings. Our brains are wired to detect emotional signals, often subconsciously through facial expressions, vocal tone, body language, and microbehaviors. Attunement allows individuals to connect on this level, responding to subtle cues with sensitivity and care. For example, noticing a fleeting expression of discomfort or fatigue and adjusting one's approach to provide comfort, space, or support demonstrates attunement. This capacity strengthens relational bonds by signaling attentiveness, emotional responsiveness, and investment in the other person's well-being. Attunement is particularly important in intimate or long-term relationships because it fosters emotional safety. People who feel understood without needing to explicitly articulate their state are more likely to engage in vulnerability, share fears, and express needs honestly. The psychological mechanism at play involves the brain's reward system. Attuned interactions activate neural pathways associated with comfort, security, and trust. Conversely, lack of attunement, failing to notice emotional cues, responding insensitively, or disregarding subtle signals, can generate emotional dissonance, feelings of invisibility, and relational stress. Even minor lapses in attunement can accumulate over time, weakening attachment and trust. Therefore, emotional alignment requires vigilance, reflection, and responsiveness, as the quality of attunement often determines the depth and resilience of human connection. Importantly, attunement is both an emotional skill and a behavioral practice. It involves observing, interpreting, and responding consciously. This includes regulating one's own emotional state to prevent projection, maintaining awareness of context, and calibrating responses to match the other's needs. For example, during moments of distress, an attuned partner may listen actively, mirror emotional tone, and offer supportive gestures rather than premature solutions or judgment. Over time, consistent attunement cultivates relational stability, fosters empathy, and reinforces secure attachment patterns. It creates a relational environment where vulnerability is safe, emotional reciprocity is naturally reinforced, and trust grows organically. In essence, attunement is the connective tissue that translates emotional intelligence into practical, meaningful relational outcomes. Consistency, attunement, and vulnerability converge in the formation of secure emotional attachment, a state in which individuals experience trust, safety, and relational depth. Attachment is reinforced not solely by moments of intimacy, but by repeated, observable patterns of care and responsiveness. These patterns signal to the brain that relational investment is reliable, creating a psychological framework in which vulnerability is rewarded with understanding, empathy, and reciprocal engagement. Secure attachment promotes emotional resilience, allowing individuals to navigate conflict, stress, or uncertainty without catastrophic emotional destabilization. It is not the absence of challenges, but the presence of predictable, supportive patterns that distinguishes secure from insecure attachment. Over time, this stability fosters mutual growth, emotional intelligence, and relational depth. The interplay between attachment and trust is particularly significant. Trust is both a prerequisite and a product of attachment. Secure attachment requires a foundation of reliable care, predictable responsiveness, and consistent attunement. Trust reinforces the perception that emotional investment is safe, encouraging openness, disclosure, and risk-taking in relational contexts. Conversely, breaches of trust, whether through inconsistency, neglect, or emotional unavailability, undermine attachment, triggering insecurity, withdrawal, and heightened vigilance. Neural research confirms that the perception of social reliability activates reward pathways, while unpredictability or betrayal engages stress circuits. This underscores the physiological reality of attachment. Relationships are not solely psychological constructs, but deeply embedded in the brain's architecture for social survival. Finally, attachment, when combined with empathy, attunement, and emotional consistency, creates a platform for relational flourishing. Securely attached individuals are more likely to engage in cooperative problem solving, express authentic emotions, and respond constructively to conflict. They model adaptive relational behaviors, reinforcing stability and trust over time. These interactions cultivate resilience, emotional intelligence, and relational satisfaction, ensuring that bonds can withstand life's inevitable challenges. Conversely, neglecting these elements through inattention, inconsistency, or lack of attunement creates fragility, leaving relationships vulnerable to breakdown under stress. In essence, the integration of these components, vulnerability, emotional consistency, attunement, and trust, forms the foundation for profound, enduring human connection, enabling individuals to experience intimacy, growth, and relational fulfillment throughout their lives. Human relationships are profoundly shaped by the principle of emotional reciprocity, which refers to the subtle, ongoing exchange of care, attention, and validation. This exchange does not rely solely on verbal communication. It is conveyed through actions, gestures, timing, and responsiveness. Consistent patterns of reciprocated attention signal to the brain that the relationship is safe, reliable, and valuable. These signals create psychological comfort, which fosters attachment and allows vulnerability to emerge without fear of judgment. For instance, a partner who regularly checks in, remembers small details, and responds thoughtfully to emotional cues communicates that the other person's feelings are recognized and valued. Over time, these microactions accumulate, establishing a relational rhythm that reinforces trust and deepens attachment. Conversely, lack of emotional reciprocity can erode connection subtly but persistently. When one individual invests emotionally while the other fails to acknowledge, respond, or match that investment, it creates imbalance. Emotional underinvestment signals disinterest or detachment, triggering feelings of insecurity, frustration, and emotional strain. Human brains are wired to detect these patterns, often subconsciously, which can lead to a slow erosion of relational trust. Even minor lapses, such as forgetting to follow through on a promise, failing to acknowledge emotional needs, or inconsistently showing attention, compound over time. Relationships are not merely defined by isolated actions, but by sustained patterns of interaction. Emotional reciprocity is the mechanism by which these patterns create stability, security, and relational satisfaction. The timing and subtlety of reciprocal behaviors are crucial. Overexpression or performative gestures may signal insincerity, while small, consistent acts of care often carry far greater emotional weight. This phenomenon highlights the importance of emotional intelligence, which allows individuals to observe, interpret, and respond to relational cues effectively. Emotional intelligence involves regulating one's own emotional state, recognizing the impact of one's actions, and adjusting behavior to align with relational needs. Acknowledging lapses in reciprocity and taking corrective action can reinforce trust and even strengthen attachment. In this way, emotional reciprocity is not only the glue that binds relationships, but also a dynamic process that requires mindfulness, reflection, and intentionality. When practiced consistently, it transforms ordinary interactions into profound, enduring connections that form the foundation of deep human intimacy. Conflict is an inevitable element of human interaction, yet its resolution is a critical determinant of relational health. Conflict emerges not only from explicit disagreements, but also from misalignment in expectations, emotional needs, and communication styles. How individuals navigate these conflicts determines whether relationships strengthen or weaken under stress. One of the most significant factors in conflict resolution is emotional regulation, the ability to manage immediate reactions, process intense feelings, and respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. Emotional regulation allows individuals to pause, evaluate the underlying causes of conflict, and approach the situation with a constructive mindset. Without regulation, even minor disagreements can escalate into damaging disputes that erode trust, attachment, and relational satisfaction. Empathy is another essential component of effective conflict management. By understanding the emotional context behind another person's behavior, individuals can respond in ways that validate experience rather than inflame tension. For example, recognizing that anger may mask fear, frustration, or past trauma enables a more nuanced, patient response. Active listening, attending to tone, body language, and unspoken cues is integral to this process. Individuals who consistently respond empathetically during conflict cultivate relational resilience, signaling that the relationship can withstand disagreements without threatening attachment or trust. Empathy transforms conflict from a destructive force into an opportunity for mutual understanding, emotional growth, and relational depth. Consistency and reliability also play a vital role in conflict resolution. When individuals respond predictably and constructively, it fosters a sense of safety, allowing vulnerability to persist even during disagreement. Conversely, unpredictable or volatile responses amplify insecurity, diminish trust, and exacerbate emotional distance. The most successful long-term relationships exhibit a pattern of stable, empathetic conflict resolution, where challenges are met with understanding, patience, and intentional communication. Over time, these interactions strengthen attachment, reinforce trust, and create a relational environment conducive to openness, emotional sharing, and intimacy. In essence, conflict is not merely a test of patience. It is a mechanism for cultivating resilience, emotional intelligence, and relational depth, shaping the trajectory of meaningful human connection. Vulnerability serves as the catalyst for deep, meaningful connection in human relationships. It involves exposing aspects of oneself that are typically guarded, such as fears, insecurities, past experiences, or unspoken desires. While vulnerability carries inherent risk, it also functions as the mechanism through which trust, attachment, and intimacy are established. The act of opening oneself to another, particularly in a measured, conscious way, signals investment in the relationship and creates an environment where reciprocal openness is encouraged. This mutual exchange fosters emotional resonance, reinforcing attachment and building relational depth over time. Vulnerability is therefore both a risk and an essential opportunity, enabling the formation of bonds that are emotionally rich, enduring, and psychologically secure. Timing, context, and the perceived reliability of the other party are critical factors in expressing vulnerability. Early or indiscriminate exposure of personal truths can overwhelm the recipient or create relational imbalance, whereas chronic withholding prevents the development of authentic intimacy. Emotional intelligence guides the individual in discerning when and how to share sensitive information, evaluating both the relational context and the readiness of the other person. Vulnerability is most effective when it is met with attentiveness, empathy, and care, creating a cycle of mutual reinforcement. Over time, this practice not only strengthens attachment and trust, but also models adaptive emotional behaviors that promote long-term relational resilience. The effects of vulnerability extend beyond the individual to influence relational dynamics. It encourages empathy, patience, and attentiveness, fostering an environment in which emotional needs are recognized and validated. Securely navigated vulnerability allows individuals to take emotional risks without fear of judgment or rejection, promoting relational growth and mutual understanding. Conversely, when vulnerability is dismissed, criticized, or ignored, it damages trust, undermines attachment, and inhibits future openness. In this way, vulnerability is both a bridge and a test. It enables profound connection, but requires conscious care, responsiveness, and reliability from both parties. When integrated with consistency, attunement, and trust, vulnerability becomes the foundation upon which deep, lasting, and emotionally fulfilling human relationships are constructed. Trust is the cornerstone of all meaningful human interactions, and it functions both as a precursor to attachment and as a product of repeated, consistent behavior. Trust is established when actions align with words and intentions, forming a predictable pattern that signals reliability. Humans are highly sensitive to these patterns, often subconsciously assessing the likelihood of emotional safety in relationships. A single breach of trust, such as a broken promise, a dismissive comment, or a failure to follow through, can create immediate emotional distress. But the cumulative effect of repeated minor breaches is far more significant. Over time, even small inconsistencies erode confidence in relational security, weakening attachment and reducing the willingness to engage vulnerably. On the other hand, consistent alignment between words and actions reinforces psychological safety, signaling that emotional vulnerability can be expressed without fear of judgment or abandonment. Beyond simple reliability, trust is closely linked with emotional attunement. Attunement is the ability to perceive and respond appropriately to another person's emotional state, often through subtle cues such as tone of voice, facial expressions, or microbehaviors. When attunement is paired with consistent behavior, trust deepens because the relationship feels responsive and adaptive. For instance, a friend who recognizes signs of stress without being told and responds with thoughtful support creates an environment of psychological security. Conversely, a lack of attunement, even in the presence of otherwise consistent behavior, can undermine trust. Humans interpret misaligned responses as signals of disinterest or emotional distance, highlighting the critical role of emotional intelligence in sustaining trust over time. Emotional intelligence encompasses both the ability to read emotional cues accurately and the capacity to regulate one's own responses to maintain alignment with relational needs. Trust is also reinforced through transparency and accountability. Relationships thrive when individuals acknowledge mistakes, clarify intentions, and take steps to repair breaches. These actions demonstrate responsibility and reinforce the perception of reliability. Conversely, avoidance, defensiveness, or rationalization of missteps weakens trust, leaving the other party uncertain about the stability of the connection. Trust is not a static state. It is a dynamic process that requires ongoing attention, effort, and conscious alignment of words, actions, and emotional responsiveness. Over time, these patterns shape not only the perceived security of the relationship, but also the emotional architecture of attachment, intimacy, and vulnerability, providing the foundation for enduring, resilient human connections. Empathy, distinct yet complementary to trust, is essential for relational depth. Empathy involves actively understanding another person's emotions, experiences, and perspectives, while responding in a way that validates and supports them. Unlike sympathy, which may involve feeling pity or concern from a distance, empathy requires engagement, reflection, and attunement. It is expressed through both verbal and nonverbal behaviors, listening attentively, mirroring emotions subtly, asking clarifying questions, and responding thoughtfully. Empathy strengthens attachment by signaling recognition, validation, and understanding, all of which are critical for fostering vulnerability and emotional openness. In the absence of empathy, relationships risk stagnation, miscommunication, and emotional withdrawal. The practice of empathy requires self-awareness. People often project their own experiences, biases, or emotions onto others, unintentionally distorting interpretation. Emotional intelligence involves recognizing these projections and consciously separating one's own perspective from that of the other person. This process enables accurate reading of emotional cues and appropriate responses, fostering trust and relational security. Empathy also involves anticipating needs, responding to subtle emotional shifts, and maintaining responsiveness even under stress. Over time, these patterns of empathic engagement build relational resilience, allowing relationships to endure conflict, miscommunication, and external stressors without breaking down. Empathy is thus both a skill and a practice. It requires awareness, intention, and continual refinement through reflection and experience. Moreover, empathy is deeply connected to relational satisfaction and emotional well-being. People who feel understood and validated experience lower stress, higher life satisfaction, and a stronger sense of belonging. Empathy fosters cooperation, reduces conflict, and facilitates problem solving, creating an environment where vulnerability is safe and attachment can deepen. Conversely, a consistent lack of empathy signals neglect, disinterest, or emotional detachment, gradually eroding trust and attachment. Effective empathy is therefore both relational and neurological. It activates reward circuits in the brain when recognized, while repeated failures of empathy can trigger stress and anxiety. Understanding and practicing empathy is essential for cultivating deep, enduring human bonds that are resilient, supportive, and emotionally fulfilling. Vulnerability and emotional transparency are the mechanisms through which trust and empathy translate into attachment and intimacy. Vulnerability involves exposing one's inner world, thoughts, fears, desires, and insecurities to another person in a conscious and intentional manner. While vulnerability carries inherent risk, it is also the catalyst for profound connection, signaling courage, investment, and willingness to engage authentically. The relational benefits of vulnerability are contingent upon the responsiveness of the recipient. When vulnerability is met with empathy, understanding, and consistency, it reinforces attachment and strengthens trust. Conversely, when vulnerability is dismissed, criticized, or ignored, it damages relational security and reduces the likelihood of future openness. Timing, discretion, and context are essential in vulnerability. Sharing deeply personal information prematurely or indiscriminately can overwhelm the other person or create relational imbalance, while chronic withholding prevents meaningful connection. Emotional intelligence allows individuals to assess the relational environment, discern the readiness of the other party, and determine the appropriate timing for disclosure. Vulnerability is most effective when it is reciprocated. Shared emotional openness creates a feedback loop that reinforces trust, empathy, and attachment. Over time, this cycle deepens relational bonds, allowing individuals to experience intimacy, security, and mutual support that is psychologically and emotionally sustainable. The interplay of vulnerability, trust, empathy, and emotional consistency forms the foundation of secure attachment. Secure attachment provides a stable environment in which individuals can navigate challenges, conflicts, and stressors without catastrophic emotional responses. It allows for constructive conflict resolution, cooperative problem solving, and emotional growth. Insecure attachment, by contrast, arises from inconsistent care, neglect, or breaches of trust, producing anxiety, withdrawal, and guardedness. Secure attachment enables relationships to endure over time, fostering resilience, intimacy, and mutual satisfaction. By integrating these elements, emotional consistency, attunement, empathy, vulnerability, and trust, humans can create relationships that are not merely functional, but profoundly meaningful, resilient, and transformative, shaping the trajectory of emotional development and relational fulfillment across a lifetime. Communication is the lifeblood of human relationships, yet it is often underestimated in its complexity and impact. Effective communication goes far beyond the mere exchange of words. It encompasses tone, timing, nonverbal cues, context, and emotional resonance. People interpret messages not only based on what is said, but also on how it is said, the context in which it is delivered, and the consistency between words and actions. This complexity means that even small misalignments can create misunderstandings, erode trust, or unintentionally trigger emotional distress. For example, a supportive statement delivered in a harsh tone or during a stressful moment may be perceived as critical, damaging attachment even if the intention was positive. Understanding the intricate interplay of verbal and nonverbal communication is essential for building and maintaining secure, meaningful relationships. Active listening is a cornerstone of effective communication. Listening requires more than hearing words. It involves observing body language, tone, and emotional cues, as well as reflecting and validating the speaker's feelings. When individuals feel truly heard, their emotional needs are recognized, trust is reinforced, and attachment deepens. Active listening also prevents misinterpretation and reduces conflict by ensuring that responses are informed by an accurate understanding of the other person's perspective. A failure to listen actively, even if unintentional, can create patterns of perceived neglect, reducing relational satisfaction and eroding trust. Over time, relationships flourish or falter depending on the quality of attentiveness, comprehension, and validation embedded in daily communication practices. Consistency in communication further strengthens relational bonds. Individuals are sensitive to patterns. Repeated alignment between words, actions, and emotional tone signals reliability and fosters emotional safety. Conversely, inconsistency, even in small, repeated ways, generates doubt, anxiety, and relational tension. The brain tracks these patterns subconsciously, forming judgments about trustworthiness and relational stability. For instance, a friend or partner who expresses care verbally but fails to act on promises creates an internal dissonance that gradually weakens attachment. In contrast, regular, thoughtful, and responsive communication reinforces trust, encourages vulnerability, and allows attachment to grow. Effective communication is therefore both a skill and a relational strategy, requiring attention, reflection, and alignment between internal emotional states and external expression. It forms the foundation for intimacy, cooperation, and enduring human connection. Conflict is not merely an obstacle in human relationships. It is an opportunity for growth, understanding, and relational refinement. The way individuals navigate disagreements, both minor and major, determines whether relationships become stronger or weaken under stress. Emotional regulation is a critical skill in conflict management. When individuals react impulsively or defensively, conflicts escalate, creating cycles of frustration, resentment, and emotional withdrawal. Emotional regulation allows individuals to process feelings, understand underlying motivations, and respond constructively rather than reactively. This capacity is closely tied to self-awareness, recognizing one's triggers, monitoring emotional responses, and consciously choosing adaptive behaviors during disagreements preserves relational stability and promotes attachment. Empathy is equally vital in conflict resolution. Understanding the emotional undercurrents of the other person's behavior, fear, frustration, past trauma, or insecurity, allows for more nuanced and compassionate responses. Empathic listening, validation of feelings, and careful reflection on the relational context transform conflict from destructive encounters into opportunities for dialogue and growth. People who consistently demonstrate empathy during disagreements cultivate relational trust, signaling that vulnerability and emotional expression are safe, even in moments of tension. By contrast, conflicts handled without empathy, attentiveness, or reflection often produce lasting harm, reducing trust and fostering emotional guardedness. Effective conflict resolution is therefore both a practical and relational skill, requiring deliberate effort to maintain alignment, connection, and mutual understanding. The combination of emotional regulation, empathy, and consistency in handling conflict fosters resilience in relationships. Resilient relationships are capable of withstanding repeated stressors, disagreements, and external pressures without compromising attachment or trust. In these relationships, conflict becomes a mechanism for refinement rather than deterioration. Patterns of constructive problem solving, emotional attunement, and responsive communication allow individuals to navigate disagreements without fear of relational collapse. Over time, this approach cultivates relational intelligence, enabling partners, friends, or family members to understand each other more deeply, predict reactions, and respond adaptively. Conflict, when approached with emotional intelligence, becomes a tool for strengthening trust, reinforcing attachment, and cultivating a relational environment that supports vulnerability, empathy, and long-term connection. Vulnerability is the catalyst that transforms trust, empathy, and consistency into profound emotional connection. By exposing one's inner world, fears, insecurities, desires, or personal reflections, individuals invite others into authentic relational engagement. Vulnerability is inherently risky. It carries the possibility of judgment, rejection, or emotional harm. Yet, it is precisely this risk that enables the formation of meaningful attachment. Relationships flourish when vulnerability is met with attentiveness, empathy, and reliability, creating a feedback loop in which openness begets reciprocity. This cycle reinforces trust and allows attachment to deepen over time, forming the emotional infrastructure that supports long-term intimacy and psychological security. Timing and context are critical in the expression of vulnerability. Premature disclosure, excessive emotional exposure, or sharing an unsafe relational context can overwhelm others or create imbalance. Conversely, excessive withholding prevents intimacy and leaves relationships superficial. Emotional intelligence guides individuals in evaluating the readiness of the relational environment, discerning when and how to disclose personal truths, and responding adaptively to the reactions of others. Vulnerability is most effective when shared within a responsive, attentive, and emotionally regulated context, as this ensures that disclosures contribute to relational growth rather than damage. Over time, these intentional expressions of vulnerability cultivate resilience, deepen trust, and promote attachment by signaling courage, investment, and commitment to the relational bond. Ultimately, the integration of vulnerability, empathy, emotional consistency, and effective communication creates the foundation for secure attachment and relational flourishing. Secure attachment fosters resilience, enabling individuals to navigate life's challenges, conflicts, and stressors without catastrophic emotional disruption. These dynamics support cooperative problem solving, emotional sharing, and mutual growth, ensuring that relationships are not merely functional but profoundly meaningful. Insecure attachment, arising from inconsistency, neglect, or breaches of trust, produces anxiety, withdrawal, and guardedness, illustrating the fragile balance required to sustain intimate human bonds. By consciously cultivating these elements, individuals can establish relationships characterized by depth, stability, and enduring emotional satisfaction, allowing connection to thrive even in the face of life's uncertainties. Human relationships are profoundly shaped by the interplay of emotional intelligence, trust, and consistency. Emotional intelligence is the capacity to perceive, interpret, and respond to both one's own emotions and the emotions of others in adaptive ways. This skill enables individuals to navigate the subtle dynamics of human interaction, including conflict, vulnerability, and attachment. Emotional intelligence involves self-awareness, the ability to regulate one's emotions, empathy, and social skills. Self-awareness allows individuals to understand how their emotions influence behavior and how they are perceived by others. Emotional regulation ensures that responses are deliberate rather than reactive, particularly in situations of stress, disagreement, or relational tension. Empathy enables individuals to understand and respond to the emotional states of others accurately, while social skills allow the translation of these insights into constructive relational behaviors. The integration of emotional intelligence into relationships supports the development of trust. Trust is built over time through consistent alignment of words, actions, and intentions. When a person demonstrates reliability, attentiveness, and responsiveness, the brain interprets these patterns as indicators of safety. Emotional intelligence enhances trust by facilitating awareness of the subtle ways actions are perceived and by promoting behaviors that reinforce relational security. Conversely, the absence of emotional intelligence can undermine trust, even in relationships that are otherwise positive. Misinterpretations, impulsive reactions, and insensitivity to emotional cues generate insecurity and weaken attachment. Over time, patterns of emotional misalignment can erode the foundation of the relationship, highlighting the necessity of conscious, skilled emotional engagement for relational longevity. Consistency is a crucial companion to emotional intelligence and trust. Human brains are pattern-seeking. They detect and respond to repeated behaviors, gestures, and emotional cues. Consistency communicates predictability, reliability, and stability, all essential for secure attachment. Inconsistent behavior, even when unintentional, creates uncertainty, anxiety, and relational fragility. Small lapses, such as forgetting commitments, sending mixed signals, or failing to follow through on promises, accumulate, weakening trust and discouraging vulnerability. By combining emotional intelligence with consistent behavior, individuals provide a stable, safe environment where vulnerability is rewarded, attachment is reinforced, and empathy flourishes. Together, these elements form the scaffolding for profound, lasting human relationships capable of withstanding conflict, stress, and life's inevitable changes. Conflict management is one of the most critical applications of emotional intelligence in human relationships. Conflict is inevitable because humans have differing needs, priorities, and perspectives. The quality of a relationship is determined not by the absence of conflict, but by how conflict is navigated and resolved. Emotional regulation is central to effective conflict resolution. By recognizing triggers, pausing before reacting, and responding deliberately, individuals prevent escalation and maintain relational stability. Reacting impulsively or defensively amplifies tension, increases misunderstanding, and damages trust. By contrast, regulated responses allow for constructive dialogue, understanding of underlying needs, and collaborative problem solving. Empathy is essential in conflict because it allows individuals to perceive the emotional context behind behaviors and statements. Many conflicts appear to be about surface issues, chores, schedules, or disagreements over minor decisions. But they often mask deeper emotional concerns such as insecurity, fear, or unmet needs. Empathic engagement involves listening carefully, validating the other person's feelings, and responding in ways that convey understanding without judgment. This approach transforms conflict from a potentially destructive force into an opportunity for mutual growth, emotional deepening, and reinforcement of attachment. By consistently demonstrating empathy during disagreements, individuals create relational environments where vulnerability is safe and emotional expression is encouraged. Consistency in conflict resolution further reinforces relational security. When individuals respond predictably, constructively, and respectfully during disagreements, trust is strengthened and attachment is reinforced. Conversely, inconsistent or volatile reactions create uncertainty and anxiety, undermining relational stability. Over time, patterns of constructive conflict resolution cultivate relational resilience, emotional intelligence, and relational satisfaction. Partners learn that disagreements, when navigated thoughtfully, do not threaten the relationship, but provide opportunities to strengthen understanding, clarify needs, and reinforce commitment. The combination of emotional regulation, empathy, and consistency allows conflict to function not as a threat, but as a mechanism for growth, mutual respect, and long-term relational flourishing. Vulnerability is the central mechanism through which trust, empathy, and consistency converge to create deep human connection. By allowing oneself to be seen fully, including insecurities, fears, and personal truths, individuals invite others into authentic relational engagement. Vulnerability is inherently risky, yet it is precisely this risk that facilitates the formation of secure attachment. When vulnerability is met with responsiveness, empathy, and reliability, trust is reinforced and attachment deepens. This reciprocal exchange of openness and understanding forms the foundation for meaningful, enduring relationships. Conversely, dismissive, critical, or inconsistent responses to vulnerability erode trust and inhibit intimacy, illustrating the delicate balance required for relational growth. Timing, discretion, and context are critical in the practice of vulnerability. Disclosures that occur prematurely or without regard for relational readiness can overwhelm or alienate the recipient. In contrast, chronic withholding of vulnerability prevents intimacy and leaves relationships superficial. Emotional intelligence guides individuals in assessing the relational environment, determining the readiness of the other party, and calibrating the depth and timing of self-disclosure. Effective vulnerability is not merely about sharing personal information. It is about sharing strategically, authentically, and with mindfulness of relational dynamics. When integrated with empathy and emotional consistency, vulnerability reinforces trust, encourages reciprocity, and solidifies secure attachment. Ultimately, the integration of emotional intelligence, trust, empathy, consistency, and vulnerability forms the foundation of secure, resilient, and deeply satisfying human relationships. Secure attachment allows individuals to navigate challenges, disagreements, and life stressors without fear of relational collapse. It fosters relational resilience, cooperative problem solving, mutual growth, and authentic emotional expression. Insecure attachment, arising from inconsistency, neglect, or poor emotional responsiveness, produces anxiety, withdrawal, and guardedness. By cultivating these elements deliberately, individuals create relationships characterized not merely by functionality, but by profound emotional depth, reliability, and enduring satisfaction, providing the framework for meaningful human connection that can withstand the inevitable trials of life while continuing to thrive emotionally and psychologically. Human attachment is a complex interplay of psychological, emotional, and neurological processes that underlie our capacity to form and sustain relationships. Attachment patterns develop early in life through repeated interactions with caregivers, establishing expectations about reliability, responsiveness, and emotional safety. Secure attachment emerges when caregivers consistently meet emotional and physical needs, providing a stable environment in which vulnerability is rewarded and trust is reinforced. In adulthood, these patterns influence how individuals perceive and engage in intimate, social, and professional relationships. A person with secure attachment is more likely to communicate effectively, regulate emotions, demonstrate empathy, and navigate conflict constructively. Conversely, insecure attachment, whether anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, arises from inconsistent, neglectful, or harmful early experiences, producing patterns of emotional guardedness, hypervigilance, or withdrawal that complicate relational development. Neurologically, attachment is grounded in the brain's reward and stress systems. Positive, reliable interactions with attachment figures stimulate the release of oxytocin, dopamine, and endogenous opioids, creating feelings of safety, comfort, and emotional satisfaction. These neurochemical responses reinforce behaviors that strengthen attachment, creating a feedback loop between experience, expectation, and emotional response. Conversely, breaches of trust, neglect, or inconsistency trigger stress responses mediated by cortisol and other stress-related neurotransmitters. Chronic exposure to relational instability can recalibrate neural pathways, heightening sensitivity to threat and reducing the capacity to form secure attachments. Understanding this neurobiological foundation underscores the profound impact of consistency, empathy, and responsiveness in cultivating and sustaining meaningful relationships across the lifespan. Attachment also serves as a foundation for emotional resilience and interpersonal growth. Securely attached individuals can navigate vulnerability, engage in meaningful self-disclosure, and maintain relational balance even under stress. They are more likely to approach conflict with a problem-solving mindset, demonstrate patience and understanding, and sustain trust even during challenging periods. In contrast, insecurely attached individuals may perceive minor conflicts or inconsistencies as threats to relational stability, triggering defensive or avoidant behaviors. By cultivating awareness of attachment patterns and intentionally integrating emotional intelligence, empathy, and vulnerability into relational practice, individuals can reshape relational trajectories. This integration enables relationships to move beyond superficial interaction toward profound, enduring connection characterized by trust, intimacy, and mutual growth, providing the emotional scaffolding for resilient, psychologically healthy bonds. Emotional regulation is a critical skill that underpins all successful human relationships, particularly those involving vulnerability and attachment. Emotional regulation refers to the ability to monitor, evaluate, and modulate emotional responses to internal and external stimuli in adaptive ways. This capacity allows individuals to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively, particularly in situations of stress, disagreement, or relational challenge. Dysregulated emotional responses, such as disproportionate anger, withdrawal, or defensiveness, can destabilize relationships, reduce trust, and discourage openness. Conversely, individuals who regulate their emotions effectively are able to maintain relational stability, support vulnerability, and reinforce trust even under pressure. Emotional regulation is closely tied to self-awareness, as individuals must recognize their emotional triggers and patterns before they can adjust their responses in real time. The practice of emotional regulation extends beyond self-control. It encompasses social awareness and responsiveness to the emotional states of others. In interpersonal interactions, the ability to sense the emotional climate, calibrate responses, and maintain constructive engagement is essential for sustaining relational harmony. For instance, during conflict, individuals with strong emotional regulation can remain calm, acknowledge the other person's perspective, and seek resolution without escalating tension. This not only preserves attachment, but also models adaptive emotional behavior, encouraging reciprocation and reinforcing relational security. Emotional regulation is therefore both an individual and relational skill. It stabilizes personal emotional states while supporting positive, attuned interactions that strengthen trust and attachment. Importantly, emotional regulation interacts dynamically with vulnerability, empathy, and consistency to form the foundation of secure attachment. When individuals are able to manage their emotions effectively, express vulnerability safely, respond empathically to others, and maintain consistent patterns of care and responsiveness, they cultivate relationships that are resilient, emotionally satisfying, and deeply connected. These relationships provide psychological safety, allowing individuals to take relational risks, engage authentically, and sustain intimacy over time. In contrast, relationships characterized by poor emotional regulation, inconsistent responsiveness, or lack of empathy often produce insecurity, anxiety, and withdrawal. Mastery of emotional regulation thus functions as a cornerstone of relational competence, enabling human beings to navigate the complexity of attachment, vulnerability, and interpersonal growth with skill, mindfulness, and enduring relational success. Empathy and attunement are central mechanisms through which trust and attachment are cultivated and maintained. Empathy involves perceiving and understanding the emotions of another person, while attunement requires aligning responses to those emotional states in ways that convey recognition, validation, and support. Together, these processes reinforce the perception of emotional safety, signaling that vulnerability is acceptable and that trust can be invested without fear of judgment or rejection. Empathic attunement is particularly effective when delivered consistently over time, as it creates patterns that the brain interprets as reliable indicators of relational security. Individuals who experience repeated empathic responses develop expectations of care and responsiveness, strengthening attachment and encouraging further openness in interactions. The practice of empathy extends beyond basic understanding. It requires perspective-taking, active listening, and sensitivity to subtle emotional cues. Facial expressions, vocal tone, body language, and micro-behaviors all convey information about emotional states that may not be verbalized. Attuned responses involve both reflection and action, acknowledging feelings, offering validation, and adapting behavior to meet relational needs. This process supports the development of secure attachment by consistently demonstrating responsiveness and reliability. Conversely, failure to attune, even inadvertently, communicates neglect, disinterest, or detachment, gradually undermining trust and discouraging vulnerability. Empathy and attunement, thus, serve as both relational skills and relational signals. They shape the emotional environment, inform patterns of attachment, and guide the trajectory of relational development over time. Empathy and attunement also interact with vulnerability, emotional regulation, and consistency to create relational resilience. Secure relationships are characterized by cycles of openness, recognition, and responsive care in which individuals feel safe expressing emotions and exploring intimacy without fear. These dynamics encourage mutual growth, cooperative problem solving, and adaptive conflict resolution, enabling relationships to endure challenges, stressors, and life transitions. Insecurely attached relationships, by contrast, are marked by emotional guardedness, miscommunication, and chronic stress, highlighting the centrality of empathic attunement in relational health. By intentionally cultivating empathy, responsiveness, and attentiveness, individuals can create relationships that are not only functional, but profoundly meaningful, resilient, and deeply fulfilling, providing the psychological and emotional foundation for lifelong relational success. Emotional safety is a cornerstone of secure human relationships. It is the perception that one can express thoughts, feelings, and vulnerabilities without fear of judgment, rejection, or abandonment. Emotional safety develops through repeated experiences of trust, consistency, empathy, and responsiveness. When individuals perceive that their emotional expressions are acknowledged, validated, and treated with care, they experience reduced anxiety and heightened attachment security. Conversely, environments lacking emotional safety, where emotional needs are dismissed, ridiculed, or unpredictably met, generate chronic stress, hypervigilance, and defensive behaviors. These environments hinder the development of vulnerability, impair trust, and weaken relational bonds, illustrating the profound impact that consistent, responsive care has on emotional well-being and attachment formation. The perception of emotional safety is reinforced by patterns rather than isolated events. Minor lapses may be forgiven if overall interactions signal reliability and care. The brain processes relational consistency as a predictor of safety, evaluating repeated cues to determine the likelihood of secure engagement. For example, a partner who consistently checks in, listens attentively, and responds thoughtfully over time creates a predictable pattern that supports emotional security. In contrast, inconsistent behavior, such as sudden withdrawal, unpredictable reactions, or neglect, creates uncertainty and activates stress responses. Humans are highly attuned to these patterns. The subtle, often unconscious, detection of alignment or misalignment shapes attachment behaviors, emotional availability, and the willingness to engage vulnerably. Emotional safety is therefore not a static trait, but a dynamic relational product requiring attention, consistency, and care. Emotional safety also facilitates adaptive conflict resolution. When individuals feel secure, they're more likely to approach disagreements with openness, curiosity, and cooperation rather than defensiveness or avoidance. Securely attached individuals can tolerate discomfort, regulate intense emotions, and engage in constructive dialogue, which strengthens relational bonds rather than weakening them. Emotional safety is the protective environment in which trust, empathy, vulnerability, and effective communication can coalesce, allowing relationships to grow in depth, intimacy, and resilience. Without emotional safety, even minor misunderstandings can escalate. Chronic stress undermines connection, and attachment patterns may regress, highlighting the necessity of sustained, intentional efforts to cultivate and maintain emotionally safe relational environments. The role of vulnerability in relational depth cannot be overstated. Vulnerability involves intentional self-disclosure, revealing fears, insecurities, or personal truths that carry the risk of judgment or rejection. It is the mechanism through which trust, attachment, and empathy are reinforced. Vulnerability is effective only when it is met with responsiveness and consistency. Dismissive or critical reactions undermine attachment and discourage further openness. The act of being vulnerable signals relational investment and courage, creating the conditions for authentic intimacy. Over time, reciprocal vulnerability establishes patterns of trust and emotional reciprocity, forming the foundation for secure, enduring relationships. The practice of vulnerability requires emotional intelligence and situational awareness. Premature or indiscriminate self-disclosure can overwhelm others or destabilize the relational dynamic. Conversely, chronic withholding prevents deep connection and keeps relationships at a superficial level. Emotional intelligence allows individuals to assess readiness, calibrate depth, and respond adaptively to relational cues. Effective vulnerability is therefore a combination of authenticity, timing, and responsiveness. It communicates willingness to invest emotionally while remaining attuned to the relational environment, ensuring that disclosures reinforce attachment rather than create stress. The strategic integration of vulnerability with empathy, consistency, and attentiveness transforms relationships into emotionally rich, secure environments that support mutual growth and resilience. Vulnerability also interacts with conflict resolution and relational satisfaction. Securely expressed vulnerability enables individuals to articulate emotional needs, set boundaries, and negotiate disagreements constructively. When met with empathy and responsiveness, Vulnerability reinforces trust and attachment, demonstrating that the relationship can endure emotional risk without damage. Insecurely managed vulnerability, whether through neglect, criticism, or inconsistency, produces emotional withdrawal, hypervigilance, and guardedness, highlighting the fragile balance necessary for relational development. Over time, the repeated practice of vulnerability, coupled with consistent care and attunement, produces relational environments characterized by intimacy, resilience, and emotional richness, illustrating the profound role vulnerability plays in shaping long-term human connections. Empathy is a relational superpower essential for attachment, trust, and intimacy. True empathy involves perceiving, interpreting, and responding to the emotional states of others in a way that communicates understanding and validation. It goes beyond intellectual recognition of another's feelings. It requires active engagement, reflection, and behavioral responsiveness. Empathy strengthens attachment by signaling care and attunement, creating an environment in which vulnerability is safe. Over time, repeated patterns of empathic engagement reinforce relational security, enabling individuals to share personal truths without fear. Conversely, lack of empathy, insensitivity, or misinterpretation of emotional cues undermines attachment, diminishes trust, and hinders intimacy. The neurological basis of empathy involves complex neural networks that process social and emotional cues. Mirror neurons, for example, facilitate the intuitive understanding of another person's emotional state, while areas such as the anterior insula and anterior cingulate cortex integrate these perceptions with personal experience to guide appropriate response. This neurobiological framework highlights why empathy is both a skill and a relational necessity. It allows humans to navigate complex social landscapes, recognize emotional needs, and respond in ways that reinforce attachment and relational stability. Empathic interactions release oxytocin and dopamine, reinforcing feelings of safety and pleasure, whereas repeated experiences of neglect or emotional dismissal trigger stress responses, highlighting the physiological consequences of relational quality. Empathy is most effective when combined with emotional regulation, consistency, and vulnerability. These elements create a cycle of responsiveness and trust that strengthens attachment and encourages reciprocal emotional openness. Securely attached individuals respond to vulnerability with understanding and care, model adaptive emotional behavior, and maintain predictable patterns of support. Insecure attachment, however, disrupts this cycle, creating emotional instability, miscommunication, and relational fragility. By intentionally cultivating empathy and integrating it with emotional intelligence, responsiveness, and vulnerability, individuals can form relationships characterized by depth, resilience, and enduring satisfaction. Empathy, therefore, is not simply a personal trait, but a relational instrument that shapes the quality, stability, and emotional richness of human connections. Thank you for joining History Teller YT on this incredible journey through the Inca Empire and Machu Picchu. Today, we've learned about the remarkable engineering, complex society, and the rich cultural and spiritual life of the Incas. We've seen how their ingenuity allowed them to thrive in one of the most challenging environments on Earth, and we've explored the dramatic impact of the Spanish conquest on their world. The moral of the story? Even the greatest civilizations can fall if their knowledge, culture, and resilience are threatened, but their legacy lies on in the ruins, traditions, and stories that continue to inspire us today. If you enjoyed this journey, make sure to subscribe to History Teller YT for more captivating stories from the past, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next adventure. There are countless more civilizations, legends, and mysteries waiting to be uncovered, and we'll bring them to life together. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and let history tell its story.